subscribe, like the video, and, if possible, join Patreon. But if you don't have much money, you can support the channel by watching the novels on euroaudiobooks.com. Remember that you can participate in the polls so that your favorite novel gets published for free.
Battle against fairy tale. Can't defeat it. What the hell am I doing? He looked at his hands. Gajeel whispered. Hey, Gajeel! Natsu shouted from above. Looking up suspiciously, he saw Natsu, who was dragged into the sky by Happy. He turned his head in disdain. What? Want to see my joke? Huh? What did you say? Natsu scratched his head strangely. Led by Happy, it fell to the ground. Then came to the front of Gajeel. Said, I just want to know, where did you learn your Dragon Slayer magic? Gajeel ignored Natsu. Instead, he continued to look at the calm sea. Hey, it's okay to tell me. Natsu moved to Gajeel again. Blocking his vision, he continued to ask. Cut. I'm so annoying. Annoyed, he turned his head to the other side. Whispered, Metallicana, Steel Dragon Metallicana. Sure enough. Are you also a magician of the dragon cult? Hearing this answer, Natsu immediately became excited. Are you too? It was the first time Gajeel had heard someone in the same situation as his own. Natsu nodded excitedly. Speaking of which, Luo Xingchen from your guild seems to be able to use dragon-slaying magic, right? He doesn't belong to the dragon cult, right? Luo Xingchen's face appeared in his mind. Gajeel asked. In the case of Xingchen, no. I don't understand what's going on, but Xingchen is very powerful anyway. Natsu gritted his teeth and replied with a smile. You didn't say anything. Gajeel shook his head. Speaking of which, where did the dragon who taught you magic go? Natsu continued pressing. I don't know, Gajeel replied. Where's that guy now? Don't you understand people's words? You don't know what you said. Gajeel, who was annoyed by Natsu, stepped forward in anger and bumped his head with Natsu. The two couldn't help covering their heads and let out a wailing sound. What the hell, talk to this guy while I be taken in too? Gajeel complained. What did you say? Natsu glared at Gajeel. Ignoring Natsu's thoughts, Gajeel looked at the sea. After a moment of silence, he said, disappeared. What? Natsu asked subconsciously. Suddenly disappeared in front of my eyes one day without saying anything. What a willful fellow. Disappeared. Shouldn't it be July 7th, 7 years ago? 99. Natsu's pupil shrank, and he said. Gajeel's eyes widened. Looking at Natsu, do you know where Metallicana is? How is that possible? Natsu shook his head. I'm looking for my father, Igneel, the dragon of fire, who disappeared 7 years ago on the 7th of July. That means, on July 7th, 777, did the two-headed dragon disappear? Gajeel murmured. Boom! Natsu suddenly burst out, his forehead resting on Gajeel's forehead. A loud roar, why are all 7? Gajeel was also angry, backed the top, and roared, how would I know? You, haven't you finished yet? The sudden sound made the two stop colliding. Oh, the stars, and Urza and Mira. Natsu looked at the three who had just come from the sea. Say hello. Then he looked at Gajeel and smiled. Nothing. The battle is already over. Just to ask about some dragons. In that case, let's go. It's over, Urza said. Of course, if you want to fight again, we are happy to accompany you. 35 Mira Jane said to Gajeel with a smile. Cut. Gajeel wrapped his arms around him and turned his head. Stop joking, Mira. Urza stopped Mira Jane seriously. Who's kidding? I haven't had enough of it yet. I'm looking for someone to practice my hands. Mira Jane responded. Then he looked at Urza, smiled, and licked the corner of his mouth. Or just you. It just so happens that the last battle hasn't been decided yet. Or you itchy again? BD Mila. Urza's face darkened. Waiting for someone to fix it for me. But it can't be you. BD Urza? Mira Jane shook her head dismissively. Unsurprisingly, the two of them put their heads on top of each other again. A series of trash talk was released immediately. Luo Xingchen, who was watching, was speechless. Although I don't want to pay attention to it, is still in front of outsiders anyway, so it's better not to let them lose face like this. One in each hand, separating the two with their heads on their heads. Luo Xingchen sighed helplessly. You better stop. Everyone is still waiting for us. Cut. I'll let you go this time. 35 Mirajane Sundara, who was separated, raised his head, then took the lead to leave. I should have let you go, BD. Urza pouted. The same steps left here. Seeing this, Luo Xingchen looked at Natsu. Let's go, maybe there will be a banquet. 5. Hearing the word banquet, Natsu immediately became excited. He glanced at Happy next to him, and the eyes of one person and one cat were shining. Banquet. Love? Then let's go, said one person and one cat also left here. Only Luo Xingchen and Gajil, who were looking into the distance, were left in place. Aren't you going? Seemingly aware of Luo Xingchen's gaze, Gajil opened his mouth in a deep voice. Just one thing I want to confirm, Luo Xingchen said. What? Gajil turned his head and met Luo Xingchen's eyes. Why did you attack Fairy Tale? Luo Xingchen asked such a question. Why is that? The president makes a decision. We implement it. It's that simple, Gajil responded. Have you lived like a puppet until now? Luo Xingchen said. Huh? Gajil froze. No emotion, extremely ego, only obey the command of the guild leader. Is this the guild you think is good? Are you really such a shallow man? A series of questions made Gajil open his mouth, wanting to refute something, but suddenly found that there seems to be no refutation. Think about it. For you, what do you need? After saying these words inexplicably, Luo Xingchen didn't stop, turned around, and left here. Only Gajil, who was left in place, quietly watched the departing back. In silence, chapter 176, Crying Makarov. In front of the gate of the Fairy Tale Guild, the members gathered around here. His eyes looked at the potholes that were repaired in front of him. President, are you sure you will not recover again? Luo Xingchen asked with his hands on his hips. It's time to change to a bigger guild. Makarov nodded slightly and said. Seeing this, Luo Xingchen didn't worry about anything. That, President. Lucy clasped his hands together and walked up with his head lowered. The expression on his face is very remorseful. Looks like you've suffered a lot too. Makarov turned to look at Lucy. Lucy's situation is not very good now. In the battle, just now, constantly fighting against the soldiers has left Lucy with scars all over his body. I'm fine. Lucy waved his hand quickly. Then he lowered his head again and said, It's just if it wasn't for me. No one thinks that way. Luo Xingchen shook his head to interrupt Lucy's words. Lucy, Makarov, who was standing at the front, also said, turning his head, those old eyes looked straight at Lucy. Slowly said, whether it is a happy thing or a sad thing, although I dare not say it is all, but at least it can be shared to some extent. This is called a guild. One person's happiness is everyone's happiness. One person's anger is everyone's anger. Also, one person's tears are everyone's tears. There is absolutely no need for you to feel guilty about it. You should be able to deeply feel everyone's heart. 35, with his head down, Lucy covered his mouth with his hands, his body trembling slightly. The whimper came out intermittently. Keep your head up, Makarov whispered. Don't forget, you are part of Fairy Tale. A kind smile appeared on the old face. Those words also made Lucy put down his hands and raised his head firmly. She unabashedly showed her tears. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Tears ran down his cheeks and fell to the ground. Wow, Lucy couldn't help but burst into tears. The wanton crying seemed to be completely integrated with the good-natured smiles around him. It reverberated in this empty place. But then again, Makarov turned his gaze to the Ghosts Guild in the distance. Eyes narrowed, thinking fast in my mind. It seems to have gone too far this time, and the council will probably be furious. No, it won't be locked up this time. Thinking of this, Makarov's face began to sweat more and more. Even a newly healed body began to tremble. Luo Xingchen, who noticed this, turned to Makarov. President called. Wow. In the next second, Makarov burst into tears, and the old tears. Luo Xingchen on the side looked puzzled. Shortly after the event with the Spectre ends, the troops of the Senate, the Knights of Lwin, appeared on the scene and surrounded all Fairy Tale members. Faced with this sudden force, everyone's expressions were different, but many were able to keep their cool. After all, the fault this time was not on his side. However, After seeing the members of the council, Natsu was like a conditioned reflex. Just pull your legs and run. But it turned out that Natsu could not escape the pursuit of the knights. As for Makarov, he cried even more sadly. But this time the council members are not here to arrest people, just to investigate what happened. Therefore, all participants of Fairy Tale are required to provide detailed process experience and so on. So I settled down near the guild. It was not until a week passed that the evidence collection was completed. Although based on evidence and eyewitness accounts, all point to the war that the ghosts initiated first. But everything still needs to wait for the council trial 2 days later to know the final result. After the members of the Senate left, except for Makarov, no one took this seriously. And the rebuilding of the guild has also begun to be put on the agenda. Fairy Tale's original address. The Fairy Tale Guild that originally stood here was demolished a few days ago. After all, for Fairy Tale, demolition of a home or something is completely trivial. In less than 10 minutes, the guild building that had stood for hundreds of years became a ruin. Makarov, who was looking at the frenzy, was ashamed. Without doubt, have these people started thinking about demolishing their homes for a long time? Today's construction site, the people of the guild come and go, it is still a lively scene. Okay, heavy dash. Natsu shivered as he carried 10 huge construction timbers on his back. Bang dash, CCBB. In the end, Natsu lived up to expectations. It was directly pressed down by the wood, causing a burst of smoke. Who told you to be greedy to hit so many at once, idiot? Looking at Natsu's ugliness, Gray, who walked leisurely carrying a piece of wood, laughed mercilessly. Who are you calling an idiot? Natsu struggled to break free from the shackles of the wood on his body. Shout out at Gray. You want to fight? Oh! Gray stopped. He looked at Natsu with a bad face. Why are you lazy to fight one by one? Natsu replied, not to be outdone. Hey, are these two starting again? Not far away, Lee Sin aside speechlessly. Looks like only Urza can cure them, said Happy on the side. Urza's case, I'm afraid it won't work either. Lisana looked in the other direction. BD Mila, can't you see when you walk? 35 Urza at this moment glared at Mira Jane aggressively. What? I'm moving something. You bumped it up without your eyes, okay? Mira Jane pouted in disdain. Then, as if thinking of something, he threw the building materials in his hand directly on the ground. Looking at Urza with bad eyes, I said, you didn't mean it, did you? The purpose is to provoke me and then fight me. Right? 95 Mira Jane, looks like I can see through you. Rolling up the work sleeves of both hands, revealing white arms. Comparing fists. Urza, congratulations, you succeeded in making me angry. Huh, I'm not that boring. It seems you're not just bad, you're imaginative. 33 Urza put his arms around him, slightly narrowed his eyes. However, since you want to fight so much, I will accompany you to the end. Come on. 99, come on. Bang, bang, bang. A loud noise echoed through the construction site. The wood that flew out of the fight between the two hit Natsu and Gray, who were still arguing in a fair manner. Boom, streepje. With a crisp sound, the two, who were still full of fighting spirit just now, lost all their energy in an instant. Go straight down. Really, even the work can't be stopped. Makarov, who used the gigantic magic to install the wood, sighed deeply. Then he looked at Luo Xingchen, who was wielding a hammer on a wooden stand. Said, how about, Xingchen, can you stop it? Huh, I don't want it. It's very troublesome. 39, they stopped after a while. Luo Xingchen, who was already familiar with this matter, waved his hand. After all the nails were set, Luo Xingchen put down the hammer. One jumped from a height. Brother Xingchen, hard work. Lisana, who was smiling below, kindly handed a glass of hot milk. Oh, Lisana, thank you. Luo Xingchen thanked softly after taking the milk. Look at you, you're sweating a lot. He seemed to notice the beads of sweat hanging on Luo Xingchen's forehead. Lisana took out the handkerchief thoughtfully and wiped it away. Right. 35 seemed to think of something, and Lisana took out a drawing from her bag, handed it to Luo Xingchen. Brother Xingchen, look, this is the predetermined, completed picture. 95, is it a construction drawing? Luo Xingchen took the drawing, then spread out. Then, the brows gradually wrinkled. Chapter 177 Love Bento. Dark Cuisine. Hey, Xingchen, what are you looking at? Your face is so ugly. Seems to have noticed Luo Xingchen's reaction. Wakabar came over with a pipe in his mouth. Oh, it's hard to say. Luo Xingchen shook his head. Passed the picture in hand to Waka. Because it is a rare opportunity, I plan to completely remodel the guild. This is the planned completion map. Lisana explained with a smile on her face. Really or not? Macau also came over. What will it be like? Gray got up from the ground and said nonchalantly, Wow, I'm looking forward to it. Natsu also seemed to have forgotten the quarrel just now. All smiles on face. Don't worry, don't worry. As Waka said, he set his eyes on the blueprint. Immediately, Wakaba squinted his eyes, took a deep breath, and then slowly exhaled. Let the smoke cover your face. Seems to be silent. The crowd also gathered around one after another and saw this so-called scheduled completion map. After a moment of silence, a drop of cold sweat ran across Macau's forehead. He shook his head in disbelief. Tutsao, wow, it's hard to comment. I don't seem to understand. Natsu blinked. It's clearly a picture of a primary school student. Gray said bluntly with his hands in his trouser pockets. And it's not even a primary school student. I really don't know. It was that idiot who drew it. Seemingly thinking of something, Gray has made an addition. Aside, Lisana was still smiling. Reminder, it's Sister Mila. Last night, at the request of the president, I stayed up all night to draw it. Gray's eyes widened. Did it turn out to be drawn by Mira Jane? Beads of sweat began to appear on his forehead. Even his feet trembled a little. Looking at Lisana, there was a little pleading in his tone. Just pretend I didn't say anything just now. I think maybe it's too late. Lisana raised her small hand, greeting behind Gray. Sister Mila, are you finished with Sister Urza? Of course. After all, someone deliberately slandered me. So come and see. I don't know when Mira Jane was standing behind Gray. Pai Xiao opened his mouth slowly without smiling. Gray's pupils shrank sharply. The pleading eyes suddenly turned to Luo Xingchen's direction. Gray understands that the entire guild can help him escape Mira Jane's clutches. I'm afraid there is no one except Luo Xingchen. But it's a pity. Luo Xingchen shook his head helplessly, obviously not planning to help. After all, trouble isn't it? Hey, Mila, listen to me explain. Gray turned back slightly tremblingly, looking at Mira Jane, whose face was extremely gloomy. Said with a smirk, What else to explain? I'm an idiot, but I don't understand. Mira Jane raised her right hand slowly. Magic poured out, and the pixel square covered her right fist. Immediately afterwards, a red glove appeared on Mira Jane's right hand. Mountain cat fist. Bang dash. You. With a crisp sound, Gray flew away. Alala, this is Sister Mila. Lisana smiled and shook her head. Mira Jane's eyes turned again and looked at Macau and Wakaba. The two were instantly startled and waved their hands quickly. Well, we didn't say anything bad about you. Don't worry, I'm listening. Mira Jane pointed to her ear with a smile on her face. Then he clapped his hands and looked at Luo Xingchen. The fierceness just now disappeared completely. The corners of his mouth even raised a gentle smile. By the way, Xingchen, it's almost time for dinner. I have brought you a bento. Really? Just now I'm a little hungry. Thank you, Mila. Luo Xingchen replied softly. Okay, wait a minute. Lisana, let's go, he said. Mira Jane greeted Lisana and left together. After a while, Luo Xingchen's table was full of lunchboxes. Looking at the scene in front of him, Luo Xingchen narrowed his eyes slightly. As if thinking of some horrible memory, he secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He looked at the crimson girl beside him and said, By the way, why did Urza make bento too? 35, that's right, on the desktop at the moment, more than just enough lunchboxes made by Mira Jane. And Urza's own spooky green gravy. You know, in the usual squad, most of the Mira Jane is cooking. Luo Xingchen will occasionally do it a few times. But Urza, this is a contestant that everyone is strictly forbidden to cook. This not only reminds Luo Xingchen of the fear of being dominated by dark dishes. Because I'm learning cooking recently. So, I made it for you to try. Urza, who was being questioned, blushed slightly and said falteringly, "It won't be poisonous, will it?" Mira Jane on the side raised an eyebrow. "Don't worry. If it is for you to eat, I will definitely poison you." In the face of Mira Jane's ridicule, the redness on Urza's face disappeared instantly, and he said with full aura, "Che, I'm afraid you can't even tell what poison is in the cooking you cook. Cooking idiot?" 35 Mira Jane folded her arms and pouted. "Oh, why are you arguing again?" Lee Sana sighed helplessly beside her. A voice interrupted the quarrel between the two. Then he looked at Luo Xingchen, who was studying Urza's bowl of green soup. Said, "Don't worry, brother Xingchen. Sister Urza is learning cooking from me recently. Yes, this is vegetable juice. It's very nutritious. You could try it." Urza also looked at Luo Xingchen with anticipation. "For flowers, okay, I'll try it." Luo Xingchen didn't hesitate. After all, with just a bowl of vegetable soup, could it be possible to give it away by yourself? After taking a mouthful of vegetable soup, Luo Xingchen's eyelids twitched uncontrollably. "Ow!" Urza blinked. "Great progress, Urza!" Luo Xingchen exclaimed in admiration after wiping the corners of his mouth. "Although it doesn't taste very good, but compared to before, the progress is indeed great." With a perfect score of 100, Urza could be considered to have progressed from a negative number to a positive number of 20 or 30. Seeing this, Urza's mouth filled with a smile. "Right," Lisana said. Then he looked at Urza Mira Jane in front of him and said, "Everyone, eat quickly. We'll have to work later." Several people chatted while eating. The atmosphere is very peaceful, of course after ignoring Urza Mira Jane's conversation. However, everyone in the conversation didn't notice. At the outer walls of the construction site, a girl with blue curly hair was biting her handkerchief. Tears rained down from the corners of my eyes. Juvia is so sad. So many people have already made lunches for Lord Xingchen. He lowered his head slightly and looked at the pink lunchbox. Juvia suddenly felt a throbbing pain in her heart. People say that they haven't slept for 3 days. As a result, Lord Xingchen no longer needs it. Woo-woo. Slowly opened the pink lunchbox. Look at the head portrait of Luo Xingchen with food. Juvia gently stroked up. "I'm sorry, Lord Xingchen." It seemed that something was decided. Juvia clenched her fists fiercely, her eyes full of determination. However, Juvia will not give up. Juvia must make a bento that surpasses everyone. 99. Then, be sure to give it to Lord Xingchen first. If that's the case, her fair cheeks suddenly flushed red. "There seems to be a deep fantasy in my mind. I didn't expect. Juvia, your craftsmanship is so good. And how hard you are. That is after tasting your own love bento," Luo Xingchen said affectionately. "So please marry me." Because of being deeply moved, Luo Xingchen immediately knelt down on one knee. 99 roses were offered to Juvia. "Okay, we're going to have 30 babies." He cupped his cheeks with both hands. The shy Juvia muttered to herself. He opened his eyes abruptly, feeling his heart beating violently. Juvia shyly buried her face in her hands. Juvia is so moved. No, Juvia must act quickly. 35 seems to have made up his mind. Juvia carried her pink lunchbox towards the distance and hurriedly left be. Chapter 178 Lucy, Heart Philia's Determination. The time is approaching afternoon. After finishing the final project today, Luo Xingchen patted the dust on his palms. It's taking shape now. Looking at the huge frame in front of him, Makarov also wiped the sweat from his forehead and nodded in satisfaction. "Then, let's go here today. Those two guys are already exhausted." Luo Xingchen looked at Natsu and Gray, who were lying on the ground not far away. "Okay, you guys also go back to rest early." Makarov agreed with Luo Xingchen's words, shaking his neck. "I have to drink 2 glasses of this old bone." After speaking, Makarov turned to greet Mikau and Waka. The three left the construction site together. "Gray, go." Luo Xingchen looked at Gray and shouted. After all, both of them lived in the boys' dormitory, so they dropped by. "Wait a minute, I'll be right here." Gray responded. Nodded Luo Xingchen, who was about to wait on the spot, noticed a back that looked a little weak. Think a little. Luo Xingchen walked towards the figure. Loki, you're not doing well recently. Luo Xingchen stopped Loki, who was about to leave. He looked up and down, frowning slightly. I hadn't noticed before that Loki was much thinner now than a week ago. Not as radiant as before. The whole person looked very haggard. Go on and say, even the face is ugly. Ahaha, it's a star. Looking at the person who came, Loki scratched the head of 743 with a smile. Then he said, no way. It is very hard to be an advocate of women's rights. 55, really? Luo Xingchen narrowed his eyes slightly. Hearing this, Loki felt a little guilty for no reason. The right hand that scratched his head did not stop, and then said, of course, you should have a deep understanding of this. After all, there are so many girls. Loki's words stopped in Luo Xingchen's scrutiny eyes. He bowed his head in embarrassment, as if thinking of something, immediately changed the subject and say, by the way, I saw Urza and Mirajan go to see Lucy not long ago. Didn't you go? Lucy should be fine, and our boys are busy building the guild, so we don't have time to go. Luo Xingchen's eyes were still fixed on Loki. Replied, that's it. Then there's nothing to do, I'll go first. Feeling guilty, Loki turned around and took a sluggish step, ready to get out of here. Looking at Loki's back, Luo Xingchen said softly, is it about time? The inexplicable words made Loki instantly froze in place. Eyes widened. He turned around and looked at Luo Xingchen, who was holding his arms in front of him. You already know? Luo Xingchen didn't speak, just nodded slightly. Loki's guess was confirmed. Helplessly smiled. Loki said bitterly, sure enough, everyone in the guild can't hide anything from you. There was an unknown meaning in that bitter smile, like a star that is about to leave the sky. I can understand your feelings for not explaining to the guild members, but I just want to say one thing. Luo Xingchen looked at Loki. Everyone is a companion. Some things, there is no need to fight alone. No, fairy tale will always be yours. Luo Xingchen's words made Loki bow his head. After a moment of silence, he slowly said, thank you, Xingchen, but this is my will and the only way for me to redeem myself. He pursed his lips and murmured softly, however, I am very happy to have a group of friends like you. Really, thank you very much. After speaking, Loki turned his body and walked towards the distance. That back is so lonely, like being isolated from the world. Shaking his head helplessly, Luo Xingchen also turned around to leave. In this matter, we still have to rely on Lucy's help. Not good. Lucy is home. Suddenly, Urza's exclamation came into Luo Xingchen's ears. Heartfilia family. Just the place to live is a huge manor that covers a town. A man named Jude Heartfilia is the master here. Also Lucy's father. In Lucy's view, his father doesn't care about him at all. Work seems to be the whole of his life. Even on his birthday, that person still ignores him. The rice balls he made for him can't let him take a look at him. It even caused him to yell angrily. For their own benefit, even those who hire ghosts to wage war on fairy tale. This is the father in Lucy's eyes. Cold, ruthless, cold-blooded. Looking at the huge and magnificent building in front of him, Lucy still felt unfamiliar, even though she has lived here for more than 10 years. Miss Lucy. Lucy's appearance immediately alerted Aunt Spet, who was cleaning the courtyard. What? Is the lady back? 55, Miss Lucy. The servants who heard the shouts came out one after another. They surrounded Lucy one by one, constantly booing and warm. I'm deeply afraid that my eldest lady will be wronged outside or something. In that voice, the meaning of concern was very clear. Lucy couldn't help but smile. Miss Lucy, my lord told you to go to the study to find him, just when everyone was reminiscing. A servant came up and said, sure enough, the daughter who ran away from home just said, look for him in the study. When she came back, that person hasn't changed. Self-deprecating smile. Lucy stepped towards the other mansion. After changing her previous outfit, a gorgeous princess dress was worn on Lucy's body. The nobility and elegance of Lucy. It is hard to imagine that such a person not long ago, still someone who works hard for a month's rent. Walking through the familiar and unfamiliar corridor, Lucy stopped in front of a door. Taking a deep breath, He pushed open the door. "You're finally back, Lucy." The door was heard opening. The man in suit and leather shoes, standing in front of the huge French window, turned his head. Seriously looked at Lucy. "Father." Lucy stopped in front of Judah. "I left this house without saying anything before. It's my fault." Lucy said calmly, "I can realize this with your personality. It seems that you have grown up." Judah nodded slightly. "If you're still obsessed, I will continue to use my financial resources and power to destroy that guild mercilessly." Lucy was silent. "Your own willfulness will bring trouble to the people around you. This time is a lesson. I hope you can remember it well. You are the daughter of the Hartfilia family, and you are not in the same world as those people." Looking at Lucy, Jude turned around again and looked out the window. Said, "I came back to you this time because I negotiated a marriage contract for you. The other party is the young master of the Curanier family. The marriage between the two parties will bring unexpected benefits to the Hartfilia family's railway company." And his tone suddenly became stern. "You have to have a son to inherit our Hartfilia family. That's all I have to say. Go back to your room first." After speaking, Gioda stopped talking and didn't even look back. "Father," Lucy, who had been silent for a long time, finally spoke up. "Please don't get me wrong. 35. The sudden words made Gioda stunned. He turned around and looked at Lucy behind him. "I came back this time just to show you my determination." Lucy looked at him straightly. "It's my fault to leave the house without saying a word, because it's an escape in disguise. So, this time I'll tell you above board. I am leaving this house." 55. Lucy. Judah didn't seem to react. "My destiny absolutely does not need you to help me decide. I'll go out of my own way. Please don't decide my marriage casually." 39. And she glared at her father. "You are not allowed to touch a single hair of fairy tale in the future." She grabbed her dress with both hands. Stabbed the gorgeous dress was torn apart by her. "If you dare to attack fairy tale again, then I, and all the members of the guild, will regard you as an enemy." She turned around and raised her hand with the fairy tale crest. Seems to be saying goodbye. "If you hadn't taken such an extreme move this time, maybe we could have communicated peacefully. But it's too late. You've done great harm to my comrades. What I really need is neither money, nor clothes, nor an arranged destiny. It's where I identify with who I am." 35. Fairy tale has become my other home, a home that is many times warmer than this one. Although I'm sad to leave the home where I lived with my mother, Aunt Spet, Grandpa Bello, Mr. Li Peng, Mr. Ed, I'm very reluctant to leave everyone. With her back to Judah, she suddenly smiled, and the smile was very poignant. "But if my mother is still alive, I believe she will support me to do what I want to do." This sentence made Judah stunned for a moment. He seemed to see the figure of the long-dead wife on Lucy's body. For a time, he couldn't speak. "Goodbye, Dad." It is no longer the unfamiliar honorific title before, but a long-lost, friendly title that has been buried for a long time. Layla Hartfilia. Years X 748, X 777. Lucy placed a bouquet of flowers in front of the tombstone. Stand up, eyes closed, hands clasped together. Praying softly. Lucy, the sudden shout made Lucy open his eyes and turn his head. Behind him, Luo Xingchen's figure came into view. The excited, happy, even jumped at Lucy. Lucy said something and then calmed down the excited companions and explained the reason why he went home. Let the misunderstood people slack for a while. Seeing this, Luo Xingchen, Urza, and Mira Jane at the back smiled helplessly. "Well, I'm so sorry for worrying everyone." On the way back, Lucy apologized to everyone. "Don't worry, we were too impatient," Urza said. "Really, I thought my little valet was leaving, but it turned out to be a false alarm." Mira Jane wrapped her arms around Lucy's neck. "Looks like we're really busy worrying about it." Gray also shook his head helplessly. "Happy is still crying." Natsu looked at Happy. Who cried?" "Happy," Sundara shook his head. "However, in future letters, try to write as clearly as possible. Otherwise, everyone will misunderstand 1.1. Luo Xingchen said. "I'm really sorry." Lucy sneered twice. "However, having said that, this town is too big." Mira Jane stretched and sighed with emotion. "Isn't the idyllic green field very nice?" Urza said, admiring the surrounding scenery. Ah, no, this is our courtyard, and it's our home until the mountain in front. Lucy pointed to the mountain in the distance and said. The voice just fell. The crowd instantly froze in place. Ah, what's wrong with you? Lucy wondered. Sure enough, Miss Qianjin. It's a casual show-off. Gray and Natsu raised their hands on the spot, their expressions broken. Natsu and Gray have both been defeated. So please say something to the three captains. Happy joked. Ah, the sky is so blue. Urza looked up at the sky in confusion. Mira Jane nodded blankly. Love, two captains have already broken down. So what about Captain Xingchen? Happy immediately looked at Luo Xingchen. Looks like I have to buy a villa or something, although it's not that big. Seemingly made up his mind. Luo Xingchen looked serious. What? There is still someone here showing off their wealth. Written to the mother in heaven. I'm living a good life now. Let me tell you, Mom, I don't think I can survive if I'm not with everyone. Because fairy tale has become a part of me. Chapter 179, this era no longer belongs to us Council Headquarters, ERA. As the council that governs the entire continent's magic circle, there are naturally many branches standing all over the continent. With so many things happening almost every day, so while dealing with something less important, members of Congress will choose to use the situation of thinking body to carry out in the branch. And as the headquarters of the Senate, basically dealing with some extremely serious incidents. The members who appear here are almost all judgments made by the body and the convening of the meeting. And this time, as the Kingdom of Fiori, the two most powerful guilds, the war between the Ghost Master and the Fairy Tale, naturally highly valued by the Senate. Therefore, the trial for this war was launched in the ERA headquarters. Only zzz, an even and loud purr resounded in the quiet hall. The one who purred was, of course, the judged Makarov. At this moment, his head lowered slightly. His eyes were closed, and the snot bubbles that only appear in deep sleep were expanding in large and small. The undisguised purring seemed to ignore the crowd sitting in front of him. In addition to the frogs on the jury, there are 10 judges with different expressions. With a huge body, the figure sitting in the highest position widened his eyes and looked at Makarov below. Below him, the old man with one eye closed and the cat-like old man seemed to be irritated by the rampant purring, and his body trembled. 22, another old woman gritted her teeth. Unbelievable eyes kept scanning Makarov's body. The blue-haired Chikurian rested his chin with one hand, with a smile on the corner of his mouth. Ursha, who was black and straight, looked like she was watching a good show. The rest of the deputies were also helpless. Excuse me, Mr. Makarov? 35 finally. The frog in charge of recording cautiously called out Makarov's name. Snapped. The snot bubble burst instantly, and Makarov straightened up immediately. With a very serious expression, he responded loudly. Exist. The court is still in session. You won't fall asleep, will you? The frog messenger twitched the corners of his mouth. Makarov's pupils narrowed. Oops, found outlook on his face. However, this kind of battle has been seen many times. Makarov reacted immediately, scratching his head in embarrassment. His eyes glanced elsewhere involuntarily. A smirk came out his mouth. Oh ho ho ho, how could such a thing happen? 35, that helpless tone came out of Makarov's mouth. For a time, many commentators did not know what to say. The final verdict was handed down in such an awkward atmosphere, because there is sufficient evidence to prove that the ghost took the lead in provoking, and also the first to start the war. Therefore, as the instigator of the war, the Dominator Council of Ghosts ordered the disbandment. Jose was also removed from the ranks of the Holy 10 Magi. As for the vacant positions, the influence of the Holy 10 is too great. Therefore, this is left for discussion at a later stage. And the most important thing is to be the victim in this war. Fairy Tale was found not guilty. Although the previous ones can be guessed, but Fairy Tale is innocent, I didn't expect it. 5. Makarov was sitting on the stone steps out of the corridor with emotion in his words. You've got to be grateful. Pony, I tried my best to defend you this time. Beside him, the same short old man made a sound. The old man's name was Yajima, and he was one of the members of the Magic Council. Also Makarov's dead friend. He was also a wizard of fairy tale when he was young. "I'll you a favor, Isha." Makarov folded his arms. He lowered his head and said, "When our guild is finished, I will treat you to goblin ramen. Then I need to add 12 slices of char siu pork." Yajima said, "12 is too many." Makarov's eyes widened, a face of reluctance. The incident this time violated Article 4 of the treaty, prohibiting the struggle between guilds, and see Makarov's stingy look. Yajima began to count Makarov's guilt on the spot. "I see," but was interrupted immediately by Makarov. "If you want 20 or 30 pieces, I'll recognize it." Makarov, who was caught, had to give in. 12 pieces of barbecued pork are enough. Yajima said. The atmosphere was suddenly not the same as before. Makarov lowered his head again and fell silent. "Pony, don't be brave." Yajima looked at the sky in the distance. Shun Sheng said, "We are not young anymore." The sudden exhortation made Makarov look at him suspiciously. The level of chaos at Fairy Tale lately has been overwhelming for many people. 35 Yajima sighed. Mikaro and Ogo of the Senate even demanded that Fairy Tale be dissolved. "If this goes on like this, one day, Xiaoma, you will be sentenced to a heavy sentence. Hurry up and retire, or your body won't be able to support it." Yajima looked at the old friend in front of him. His tone revealed concern for him and worries about the future of Fairy Tale. Looking into the distance, Ajima let out a long sigh. "This era is no longer ours, Pony." Makarov said nothing. He just raised his head and looked into the distance as well. Under the sun's rays, the two small figures looked so lonely. Fairy Tale, on the site of the guild building being repaired. The loud clapping of the table caught everyone's attention. "You're saying try again." Urza's angry words silenced the scene. "Urza," Lucy, who was talking to Lisana, asked suspiciously. At the temporary bar on the side, putting the book on his cheek, Luo Xingchen, who seemed to be sleeping, was also awakened. He took down the book and looked in Urza's direction. And opposite her, that insolent figure. "I'll take this opportunity to speak clearly." 35 Laxus looked at Urza with a smile on his lips. "This guild doesn't need weak guys." Turning his head, he looked at Levy, Jet, and Doria. There was a strong disdain in the words, as if mocking. "It's really a shame. If it weren't for Xingchen, you might still be killed by that garbage iron dragon. 5 being looked down upon by ghost people. I'm embarrassed for you all." Those words made almost everyone on the scene burst into anger. "That's too much," Lucy said uncontrollably. "Oh, by the way, and you, the culprit, the eldest daughter who only uses celestial spirit. If it weren't for you." Boom! Laxus, shut up. Not far away, the sound of slapping the table, mixed with the roar, suddenly sounded. "You who were not involved in this matter from beginning to end have no right to criticize anyone." Mira Jane glared at Laxus. "Ha ha." Laxus stood up with a smile. "Isn't this nonsense? It had nothing to do with me." He spread his hands indifferently. This attitude made Urza's face sink. But before she made any move, Natsu, who was beside him, rushed up unbearably. "Laxus, you ruthless BD." With a roar, Natsu shook his fist at Laxus. There was still disdain on his face. Brush won, the golden thunder flashed, and Laxus instantly moved behind Natsu. 743. The loss of the target leaves Natsu with a punch in the air, so that the whole body leaned forward uncontrollably. But the imagined fall did not happen. Natsu's scarf was firmly grasped in his hand. "Help him stabilize his body." Xingchen, looking at Luo Xingchen, who was holding himself with one hand and put the other in his pocket. Natsu gave a cry. "You let me go and let me duel that guy." Natsu yelled, "Ha ha ha, you can't even touch me. What kind of duel is there?" Laxus still taunted Natsu. "You're going too far, Laxus." Luo Xingchen looked directly at Laxus. The coldness in the words is very clear. Excessive. Laxus didn't seem to feel anything. Staring at Luo Xingchen, he said word by word, "What I say is the truth. Weakness is the original sin. Because of this, the guild is needed. No one is born strong." Luo Xingchen retorted with his face unchanged. Hearing these words, Laxus couldn't help shaking his head. It seems that you are indeed bound by the weakness of your companions, and now even you are talking about these boring things. I never thought that was a bondage. It's here again. In this world, only power is everything. One day, I will let you understand this, Xingchen. I'll wait and see. The two looked at each other. Invisible pressure spread throughout the audience. Even the breathing of the people around him gradually became heavier. Oh, let's go here this time. There will be a battle between the two of us one day. 99 Laxus turned around and stepped away. When I inherit the guild, all those weak people will disappear from me. All the guys who resisted me will be kicked out. I want to create the strongest guild that no one can underestimate. Ha 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 ha. With his back to the crowd, Laxus raised his hands. The frantic voice faded away. Chapter 180, The Next Generation of Young People. The figure of Laxus disappeared from everyone's eyes. The sense of disobedience that permeated all around also gradually disappeared. Everyone in the guild also gathered together in twos and threes to talk about it. Watching Laxus leave, Luo Xingchen narrowed his eyes slightly, his eyes flickering. Forget it. Leave him alone, Xingchen. Urza walked up and said. Then he looked at Luo Xingchen and said, stop talking about this. Do you want to go to work together? Hey, doesn't work call me? Mira Jane also came up, squinting at Urza. Can you do it without me? Call Nat Su and the others, just to relax after work. I've been a little tired recently. Luo Xingchen put forward his own suggestion. At the bar, Lucy sat down dissatisfied and muttered, inheritance or something, thanks to him for daring to say such a big thing. Actually, it can't be said to be boasting. Lee Sena wiped the wine glass in her hands. He shook his head slightly. Question mark. Lucy looked at Lee Sena suspiciously. After all, Laxus is actually the grandson of the president, Lee Sena explained. Unable to believe all this, Lucy let out a surprised voice. So, if the president really retires, the next president might be Laxus, Lee Sena said. How could this happen? Lucy said refusal all over his face. I can't accept someone who treats a partner like this as the president. However, you don't have to worry too much. Lee Sena smiled. After all, there are rumors that the chairman is unable to retire because of this. And having said this, Lee Sena paused. He looked at Luo Xingchen, who was talking to Urza Mira Jane in front of him. Then speak. If you really want to say it, in fact, the chance of Xingchen becoming the president is much higher than that of Laxus. Really? Lucy also looked at the black-haired figure and asked. Of course, after all, Brother Xingchen is much better than Laxus in every aspect. Lee Sena replied. Also, it seems that from a very early time, the president has been cultivating Brother Xingchen's abilities or something. Is that so? If it is Xingchen, he will definitely do well. After all, he has always been a person who cares about his companions very much. Lucy's index finger touched his chin. He seemed to have imagined Luo Xingchen when he was the president. However, Brother Xingchen doesn't seem to want to be the president very much. Speaking of this, Lisana's face was full of distress. According to his words. With that said, Lee Sena put down the wine glass in her hand. The raised smile also subsided, following Luo Xingchen's impatient look. The clear and pleasant voice gradually lowered, imitating Luo Xingchen's tone, and said, Forget it. It's very troublesome to be the chairman. I'd better be more free. Speaking of which, it's really pretty. Looking at Lisana's performance, Lucy twitched the corners of his mouth and complained. Hey, what about Lord Xingchen? Western Fiori Kingdom. Somewhere in the Dark Guild's lair. Juvia, who was wearing a blue coat, hid quietly behind a stone wall that had just been damaged. He stuck his head out and kept observing the few people in front of him. Is accompanied by the roar of the Taurus, celestial spirit Taurus. The mage in front of him was directly KO'd with one punch. That's great. I'll kill another one now. Lucy said excitedly. It's my honor to be able to protect Miss Lucy with such a graceful figure. Taurus opened his mouth with love in his eyes. Bang one on the other hand. Natsu grabbed the mage in his hand and slammed it against the wall. Dissatisfied, he said, These guys are so weak. 35. Even if you are so stupid, do you still have the nerve to be a wizard of the Dark Guild? Gray also stepped on the cheek of a miscellaneous soldier and kept kneading. Damn it, to dare to take action against us. Don't even think it's easy to leave. One of the knocked down soldiers shouted in dissatisfaction. Our main force is still outside and is coming soon. You can wait to die in peace. 39. Oh, is that so? Gray shook his head disdainfully. Raising his eyes, he looked not far away. What you should be worried about is your large army. After all, there are 2 monsters out there. Accompanying Gray's voice just fell. Boom, 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 1. A terrifying explosion, accompanied by a violent fire, shone in the outside world. Immediately afterwards, countless figures were directly blasted into the air. Whoa, What's going on with these 2 women? 35. Monster. An extremely miserable howl was passed over in an instant. How is it? Gray looked at the figure who just spoke up with a smile. Damn it. Our president, Lord Dan Peng, will not let you go. The man shouted again. Is it him? A calm voice came from not far away. Look along the sound and you can see the black-haired figure was carrying Dan Peng, who had lost consciousness, towards this side. Your boss has been defeated. Happy, who followed him, raised his paws and said, Lord Xingchen has appeared. The first time the black-haired figure appeared, Juvia, who was hiding in the back, suddenly became excited. His fiery eyes stared straight at the figure not far away. Cheeks are rosy. At this moment, Juvia is watching the target. Luo Xingchen was carrying the leader of the Dark Union to the crowd. Throw it on the ground. As expected of a star, 35 looking at the figure in front of him, Lucy gave a thumbs up and praised. Should he be finished here? Luo Xingchen asked while looking around. It's almost done. Urza and the others should be about the same, right? Gray responded. Then let's go. I'm still waiting for the task to finish and relax. Shaking his neck a bit near, Luo Xingchen walked towards the outside world. The others did not hesitate and immediately followed. Outside world. Lucy stared dumbfounded at the large forest that was completely destroyed in front of him. The horror in his eyes seemed to be unable to stop. He exclaimed, Hey, it's too much to do. Really? Mira Jane turned her back. Then he waved his hand indifferently. It's okay. We restrained a little. Urza swung the long sword, throwing the members of the Dark Guild who had lost consciousness in their hands to the ground, nodding in agreement. How cool. If I had known, I would have stayed outside. Looking at everything in front of him, Natsu said angrily, I haven't had enough trouble. You've made enough trouble, and their guild's castle has basically been destroyed. 35. The slightly normal Gray sighed. However, at present, everyone has indeed restrained a lot. Arms clasped, Gray's tone was extremely proud. What will happen if you don't restrain yourself? Lucy collapsed and covered his head. She seems to be able to imagine the next scene of losing money. Okay, don't worry. This job ends earlier than expected. Why don't you enjoy life earlier? He patted Lucy on the shoulder. Luo Xingchen took the lead to leave. That's right. This season is the best time to go to the hot springs. Let's go to the hot springs. Mira Jane put her hands behind her back. He quickly followed Luo Xingchen's side and walked side by side with him. In that case, let's go to Spa Town Hozenka, which is said to be the most famous hot springs sanctuary in Magnolia. Urza also followed and said, Oh, onsen. Natsu and Gray exclaimed excitedly. He quickly greeted Lucy and left the place together. A group of people walking away. The time is approaching night. Inside the fairy tale construction site, Makarov was sitting alone on a wooden stand, drinking wine. Putting the wine glass aside, Makarov opened his slightly drunk eyes. Looking into the distance, the town under the moonlight seemed so lonely. Retire, he murmured softly. Turning his eyes again, he looked at the new guild that had begun to take shape. The guild will be completed soon. Since this is the case, the position of the guild leader should be passed on to the next generation. Shun, Zhao Ma Zhao, took a deep breath. Makarov seemed to be lost in thought. That fellow Xingchen, like guild arts, is not interested in the position of the president at all. Laxus, this guy has serious psychological problems. Mystigan's words It is impossible to communicate with humans normally. Touching his chin irritably. If Urza or Mira Jane. President, I finally found you. Lysana's sharp voice interrupted Makarov's thoughts. What's wrong? Lysana. Makarov turned his gaze to Lysana, who was holding the document below. That's it. Brother Xingchen and Sister Mila seemed to be in trouble again. Below, Lysana raised the document in her hand and said, Huh. Makarov widened his eyes suddenly. While they were working, they destroyed large swathes of the forest. Lysana's words instantly turned Makarov pale. The council asked us to immediately submit a letter of repentance for this matter. President, would you like to take a look? He seemed to notice Makarov's stunned look. Lysana asked kindly, President, what's the matter? Makarov's grown mouth kept shaking, then suddenly stood up, shout out in the silent night sky. How am I supposed to retire like this? Chapter 1, 81 New Home, Cohabitation. The next day, Elfman looked helplessly at Natsu and Gray, whose heads were BG together. He brushed aside the injuries on both of them, and the bandages wrapped round and round. At this moment, the boss of the two stared at each other with gnashing teeth. There was an unpleasant smell all around. What are they doing again? Elfman asked Kana next to him. Kana put down the barrel in her arms. With a mocking smile in the corner of his mouth, he said, I heard that I was playing throw pillows at work, and I ended up being beaten like this. Throwing a pillow can't throw such an injury. How did you do it? Elfman grumbled. You brat, you're just fighting pillow fights. Why are you working so hard? 35, seemingly unable to bear it any longer, Gray was the first to break the silence. I'm always trying to do things. Natsu responded, not to be outdone. If you're serious, why would you lose? Gray scoffed. Huh? Wasn't you the one who lost? Natsu yelled. Lucy, I won, right? The two turned their heads at the same time. Looking at Lucy sitting at the bar, he said in unison. Lucy, who was eating, turned his head. A completely different face appeared. The expression on his face seemed to be emotionless, and even made the two of them see a trace of Urza. Noisy, the unwavering tone was like Urza possessed. Made Natsu and Gray hug each other in horror. Hey, I'm sorry, the two admitted on the spot. Dejected and left here. Awesome, Lucy. I didn't expect that other than Sister Urza, someone else could stop these two. Lysana exclaimed in admiration. Men's 747. Elfman murmured. But it seems like something is coming. Elfman's eyes caught the door of the construction site. Splashes of smoke. It seems that many people are approaching here. There's always a bad feeling. Lysana narrowed her eyes slightly. Lucy, are you in a bad mood? Happy came to Lucy's side and asked. No, Lucy responded. But your face doesn't look very good. Happy looked at Lucy worriedly. Anyway, if you have something on your mind, you can tell us. Happy said, holding up his little paw. Ah, thank you. Lucy sighed softly. Actually, just a little confused. Biting the spoon, Lucy's eyes were a little confused. Didn't we meet Loki last night at Spa Town Hozenka? Happy nodded. He also hit those two evil wizards who were targeting you. 99. Well, what else did the guy say after that? Do you know how sad the stars that can't go back to the sky? Such inexplicable words made me very confused. He frowned slightly. I don't know why, but I always feel that something big is about to happen. The sudden voice sounded not far from Lucy. One person and one cat turned around and found that Lysana was surrounded by girls. Excuse me, is Loki here? One of the girls looked at Lysana and asked. Loki, he's not here today. Facing the aggressive girls, there was only a helpless smile on Lysana's face. Loki is going too far. CCBB. By the way, what's the matter with you? What's the matter with you? Who are these people? Lucy asked suspiciously. Love, these are the girls in town, like Loki's girlfriend, Happy explained. On the other side, the girls around Lysana were still chattering. He suddenly said last night that he was going to break up. 35, it PD'd me off, and so am I. Woo, why on earth did he say goodbye? 35, that aggressive aura, made Lysana take a step back. The helplessness on his face is even more, I don't know either. Could it be that Loki's destiny girl appeared? Who is it? In this guild. Speaking of this, The girl's emotions became more unstable. I finally know what the anxiety was just now. Lisa wanted to cry without tears. She turned to look at her brother. Try to help yourself get out. Lisa, why don't you call my sister? I can't handle these people. Even Elfman on the side was helpless. He whispered in Lysana's ear. It's useless, my sister and Urza are not here. They went to the villa area on the east coast of Magnolia to visit Brother Xingchen's new house. Speaking of this, Lysana looked remorseful. If it wasn't for my work, I would have gone too. Or can I use it here to face this Shura field? It seems that out of the corner of the eye saw Lucy eating melons. Lysana waved to Lucy as if she had found savior. Lucy, help. The help-like words successfully diverted the girl's attention. Lucy, who was named, was taken aback. Then he met the eyes of the girls that seemed to be eating people. Is that her? It's kind of cute, and the figure is still very good. The risk factor is max. Is it Loki's true destiny? Lucy ran without hesitation. The girls behind him reacted immediately, took steps, and chased out. Around the east coast of Magnolia, compared to the town center, the flow of people here is much less. The scenery is also much more beautiful. A single-family villa with a manor stands nearby. Apparently, this is the villa area of Magnolia. A 3-story single-family villa welcomed his new owner. After paying the balance of 30 million J in full, the real estate agent in a neat suit left here with a smile. Luo Xingchen was left alone. Look around the luxurious decoration. Luo Xingchen breathed a sigh of relief. It's not that I feel bad for the tens of millions of J. After all, I have to do a few difficult S-level tasks or SS-level tasks. The most important thing is that although we are in a different world, we still rely on our own efforts. You have achieved a goal you couldn't do in a previous life. Looking around, frowning slightly. It's just that it's too big and it's a little deserted. What's the matter? Xingzhong, Xingzhong. Luo Xingchen's contemplation was interrupted by the doorbell ringing outside the door. With doubts, Luo Xingchen walked to the front door. Pull open the closed door. Stars. Good afternoon. Mira Jane greeted with a smile. I heard that you really bought the villa, so the two of us came to visit. Urza said seriously. So it's you, come in. Luo Xingchen walked away. Nice. Mira Jane came in first. Looking around, he couldn't help sighing. The decoration style is very beautiful. Is it a classic style? Urza turned to ask. That's right, but there's some other elements mixed in. Luo Xingchen brought the two of them a glass of water. But the excited Mira Jane was in no mood to sit down. Instead, they looked around. Speaking of which, it's not cheap, is it? Urza sat on the edge of the sofa. Luo Xingchen raised a water glass and asked. Actually, it's not too expensive, and Urza is not a problem if you want to buy it. 33, Luo Xingchen said. How can my armor cost a lot of money? Urza shook his head helplessly. Indeed, Urza earns a lot of money, even though he is also an S-rank mage. However, the construction and maintenance of the armor are very expensive. So Urza doesn't have any spare cash. Mira Jane and Urza are in a similar situation. They have no spare money. The difference, though, is that most of her money goes to compensation. But if you really want to buy it, it's not a big problem. Grit your teeth, restrain yourself, and squeeze out. No way. That's how powerful mages make money. Hey, Xingchen, there are quite a few rooms above you. Just as the two were talking, Mira Jane stuck her head out from the railing on the second floor and said, after all, sometimes you can hold a party or something. If you have more rooms, it will be convenient for you to stay overnight. Luo Xingchen replied, Is that so? How about Lysana and I rent 2 rooms with you? Mira Jane's mouth twitched slightly. So malicious. After all, I've lived in the girls' dormitory for a long time, and I'm a little bored. No problem. If you want, you can move here anytime. Luo Xingchen agreed without thinking. Suddenly, a successful smile flashed across Mira Jane's face. He walked downstairs excitedly. However, Urza, who was sitting next to Luo Xingchen, couldn't sit still. Put the water glass in your hand on the table, looking at Luo Xingchen with a serious look. If that's the case, I'll rent a few houses too. 35. After all, my equipment for the girls' dormitory can't be put down. Your place is quite big, so it shouldn't be a problem, right? Saying that, Urza stared at Luo Xingchen, afraid of being rejected. Of course, there's no problem. It's good to have a lot of people, but I still think it's a little deserted here. 35 Luo Xingchen still did not refuse. Urza breathed a sigh of relief, then stood up immediately. A resolute opening. Okay, I'll go back and pack my bags now. With that said, Urza walked towards the door. As soon as the door was opened, Urza saw Lee Sena hurriedly running towards him. Something bad. Loki has left the fairy tale. Chapter 182. The stars returning to the starry sky night. The stars hang in the sky and a night sky. Under the night sky is a huge annular waterfall, and right in front of the waterfall, the cliff clearing where the rocks have accumulated ends. The modest tombstone is surrounded by a bouquet of flowers. There are two figures standing in front of the tombstone, Loki and Lucy. At this moment, both of them looked in front of them without exception. The horror in his eyes didn't go away. On the opposite side of the two, the huge body was shrouded in starlight and floated in midair, a terrifying magic pervading all around. Celestial Spirit King, that is the most powerful celestial spirit, the celestial spirit known as the King. Behind a few people holding each other, near the cliff entrance of the mountain, Luo Xingchen and Urza were there, as well as Mira Jane and Lee Sena. Loki is here, and Lucy, and that guy isn't the celestial spirit king you're talking about. 99, Mira Jane frowned tightly, staring at the huge figure shrouded in starlight. He asked Luo Xingchen, who was beside him. Luo Xingchen nodded slightly, looking at the people in front of him. Let's take a look first. After all, only Lucy can save him. If it really doesn't make sense, Luo Xingchen's eyes narrowed slightly. That may not be the case. Even by force, Loki must be returned to the celestial spirit world. Urza nodded and agreed with Luo Xingchen's words. Lee San on the side looked at Loki and shook her head gently. I just didn't expect that Loki is celestial spirit. If it wasn't for what Brother Xingchen said, we would have found nothing. Yes, on the way here before. Luo Xingchen also told everyone about Loki. After all, things have come to this point. Therefore, there is no need to hide anything. As for why I didn't say it before, just because at present, Loki is thinking about redemption. He didn't want anyone to interfere in his decisions. If the fairy tale people know about this, not only is it not helpful, it may even backfire. Let Loki have the idea of leaving in advance. At that time, it was not easy to find him. Therefore, the moment I learned that Loki had quit fairy tale, Luo Xingchen used the communication magic crystal to notify Lucy immediately. At the same time, Lucy, with the help of the celestial spirit of the Southern Cross, learned that Loki is celestial spirit. Without any hesitation, Lucy rushed towards this direction. It was here that I learned the ins and outs of the whole thing. That was 3 years ago. There was a story about a person named Karen Lilica in the Blue Pegasus Guild. As Blue Pegasus, a powerful and popular female sorceress who often appears in Magic Weekly. Karen naturally has many suitors, and this also contributed to Karen's arrogant character, regularly dating men from outside. Karen, who treats those people like ATMs when he doesn't want to talk to him, will release his celestial spirit to deal with this group of people. Celestial spirit named Aries, zodiac sign, celestial spirit of Aries. Because of her sweet appearance and soft personality, she became the target of Karen's frequent bullying. Karen doesn't care what the celestial spirits think. Just use it as a tool. Use to do housework and meet the pursuits of men who make them feel bored. Even in battle, it also uses it as a shield to block enemy attacks. However, such an approach angered the president of Blue Pegasus, Bob. That day, an angry Bob gave Karen the first serious warning. Celestial spirit is also alive. If you continue to do whatever you want, you will suffer the consequences. Karen, who had never seen Bob angry, was terrified. But with it came anger. It all boils down to the results of Ares' whistleblower. Naturally, Ares suffered a disaster. Aside from the whiplash, Karen intends to trap Ares on Earth for 7 days. As a celestial spirit, it cannot stay in this world for a long time. That would cause great pain to celestial spirit's body. So, Loki, who is also the zodiac, chose to help his companion Aries. He forcibly replaced Aries and came to the world, and negotiated with Karen to get her out of the contract with him and Aries. Such a request, Karen, is naturally impossible to agree to. After all, the two keys of the zodiac are very precious. However, even if the door was forcibly closed, Loki, who used his own magic power to pass through the door, would not be able to return. And Kana can't do both. In other words, if she doesn't break the contract, then Loki won't leave. And Karen can't use magic either. And Loki also said that as long as Karen doesn't cancel the contract for one day, so no matter how long, he will persevere. During this time, Karen begged, got angry, and even fought against Loki. But nothing could change Loki's decision. He endured great pain in silence like this, and stayed in the world for 3 months. The body also began to gradually adapt to the human world. I thought I could forgive Karen, but I received news of Karen's death. Karen, who couldn't summon 2 celestial spirits at the same time, took a job without permission for the reward, then lost his life at work. This is a result that Loki never expected. That is, on that day, Leo of Leo was unable to return to the celestial spirit world because he indirectly killed his master. This is absolutely not allowed in the celestial spirit world, and it is also the law. After learning it all, Lucy couldn't bear it. She could not accept such a sin. So, as a celestial spirit sorcerer, Lucy wants to force open the closed door of Leo. If this is the law of the celestial spirit world, it's up to me to change it. 33 The words, full of determination, seem to pass through the limitations of the 2 worlds. Alarmed the celestial spirit king. So, Wong appeared. The celestial spirit king looked at the few people below. The huge beard shivered, said, "My old friend, according to the covenant with mankind, shall not harm the bearer of the key." 35 Leo of Leo, although not directly related, but you who have taken such actions indirectly have been banned from returning to the celestial spirit world. 35 The voice of the celestial spirit king echoed slowly all around. "Wait a minute, this is too much," Lucy retorted. "My old friend, this is an unchangeable rule." The 35 celestial spirit king shook his head slightly. 3 years, but Loki has suffered for 3 years for the sake of his companions, for the sake of Ares. There is no way to do it. Lucy said loudly. "I feel the same way about my old friend's wishes." "What old friend?" Lucy interrupted the celestial spirit king. She stepped forward and yelled at the celestial spirit king. "You heard me clearly, old bearded man." Beard? Even the celestial spirit king was a little surprised by the name Lucy. Karen's death was indeed a sad accident, but if you want to say that Loki is guilty, I absolutely cannot accept it. Even if Loki disappears, Karen won't be able to come back. It's just a grief. This is not a sin at all. Thinking about your companions is definitely not a sin. A deafening roar was transmitted under the night sky. At this moment, all of Lucy's celestial spirits responded to her heart. Following Lucy's outburst of magic, he broke through the door and surrounded her. The celestial spirits actually appeared at the same time. The horror in Loki's eyes lingered. Although it was only for a moment, it directly drained all of Lucy's magic power. Lucy fell to the ground helplessly. "Lucy, are you dying?" Loki yelled at Lucy. "My friends who just showed up think so." Lucy looked at Celestial Spirit King. The persistence and stubbornness in his eyes are so clear. If you're also Celestial Spirit, you can definitely understand the mood of Ares and Loki. Squinting slightly, the Celestial Spirit King fell silent for a while. Looking at the stubborn girl, she seemed to recall the past. The same blonde, the same appearance, the same stubbornness. A stubborn figure who still wants to open the door even if he wants to give his life. Just like this girl. Look far away, the four figures surging with magic power standing at the entrance of the cliff. Celestial Spirit King sighed helplessly. "Is this what you call a friend?" "It's unexpectedly wonderful." Looking at Lucy, a low and calm voice sounded slowly. "Since the old friend have already said this for the sake of, then the wrong one might be the rules." Leo, who was convicted for the sake of his companion Ares. and the old friends who worked so hard to save Leo, and your comrades. In view of this beautiful and firm friendship, this matter is dealt with as a special case. Celestial Spirit King looked at Loki and said, Leo, I specifically allow you to return to the celestial spirit world. Loki was stunned. The sudden announcement made him feel so heavy. I absolve you of your crimes, and you will thank the stars for their guidance. The Celestial Spirit King's body began to fade gradually. Loki lowered his head, tears pooling and then bursting out his eyes. If you still want to continue to atone for your sins, then become your friend's help and do your best to protect her. 5. She is someone who is worth protecting with your life. The huge body completely dissipated. The shackles that had kept Loki from returning to the celestial spirit world disappeared at this moment. He said so. Lucy looked at Loki. Loki covered his cheeks with his hands. Tears leaked from between his fingers. Lifting his head, Loki showed a long-lost smile. Nodding lightly, the sins I committed have not disappeared, but you have gained the courage to move forward. His body was gradually enveloped in brilliant golden light spots, gradually began to dissipate. In the future, in addition to being a member of Fairy Tale, I will also be your strength. Thank you, Lucy. And looking back, the 4 smiling people. Stars, Urza, Mira Jane, Lysana, and Fairy Tale. Thank you. 35. The golden key appeared in Lucy's palm. It also means that Lucy has once again obtained a key to the Zodiac. However, at this moment Lucy reacted. He followed Loki's line of sight just now. Why are you here? Of course I'm here to pressure the scene. Mira Jane folded her arms and said with a smile, Actually, I was worried, so we followed. Lysana explained helplessly. Anyway, it's settled now, Urza said. Sure enough. Only you can do this, Lucy. Luo Xingchen said softly. Yes, Xingchen, you should already know about Loki. Lucy suddenly realized. Luo Xingchen smiled and shook his head. He stretched out his hand and beckoned. Let's go. Hurry back and tell everyone. After all, everyone is worried. 35? Oh, okay. Lucy hurriedly put away the keys, then ran toward the crowd B. Chapter 183 Trick, Can't Stand It. The next day, above the Fairy Tale construction site, Celestial Spirit, Natsu, who just learned of a series of events yesterday, he looked up and down at Loki in front of him. Doubtful. Yes, I'm Celestial Spirit. Loki responded with a smile. But it's amazing we haven't found it at all. 55. Gray walked over with his arms around him. That's not right. Natsu was still looking around at Loki's side. You are neither a cow nor a horse. Natsu's most direct reflection of Lucy's celestial spirit. It is a cow, a horse, a fish, and some strange things. Natsu, isn't the Virgo you know also human? Loki answered, No, that guy can become an orangutan. 35. Natsu said seriously. If you're going to say that, you're right. Loki was powerless to refute. Loki is the celestial spirit of Leo. Lucy interjected. Lion. Natsu and Happy startled. Isn't that a grown cat? Happy looked at Loki, 747, enviously. That's right. Loki replied with a smile. What are you reversing right and wrong? Lucy yelled with a grim face. But Happy ignored Lucy's correction. The eyes of admiration still looked at Loki. So handsome. Loki smiled. However, having said that, is your body all right? Listen to the stars. Your celestial spirit will cause great harm in the human world for a long time. 5. Gray thought of something and asked with concern. Looking at Gray, Loki shook his head slightly. Although he hasn't fully recovered yet, there is nothing serious. I came here this time to say hello to everyone, by the way. Saying that, Loki put his hand into his pocket, pulled out a few tickets, handed to Gray, Lucy, and others. Said, Give this to you, by the way. 35, What is this? Lucy took the ticket suspiciously. This is the accommodation voucher of the Akane Resort Hotel. I have received a lot of care from you here, so let's take this as a thank you, said Loki. Go have fun for a few days. Oh, the sea. Lucy's eyes lit up when he saw the promotion above the ticket. Oh, and it's a luxury hotel. Gray was also excited. Wow, so cool. Natsu looked like he had never seen the world before. Roof, love. Resort hotel. We haven't been there yet. Happy also said with a small paw. I also gave him a few of Xingchen. I wish you all a good time. Saying that, Loki turned into a blip and returned to the celestial spirit world. I said, what are you guys still doing? Do you want to be left behind by us? Urza's voice came over. It also attracted people's attention. Pulling the big scooter as always, but it is different from before. Most of the pull this time is something for vacation. You can even see sun umbrellas and retracted seats and benches. On the side is a slightly excited Mira Jane and the lazy Luo Xingchen. But without exception, the three of them have already changed into their vacation leisure clothes at this moment. One person wears a pair of sunglasses, and the atmosphere is extremely leisurely. It's so fast. Lucy, Natsu, Gray all grew their mouths in unison. There's a new understanding of the mobility of the so-called S-class mages. By the way, is Lee Sena really not going? Luo Xingchen looked at Lee Sena at the bar. That's right, the construction of the guild is almost finished. Why don't you give yourself a vacation or something? Mira Jane took off her sunglasses. He looked at his sister. No, the president is not here today. I need to watch here, I can't go. Lee Sena shook her head helplessly. With a smile on the corners of his mouth, he looked at the crowd. It doesn't matter, Sister Mila and Brother Xingchen. Anyway, there will be opportunities in the future. This time I will forget it. 39, have fun playing. What a pity. That's the next time, Urza said. Then let's go. Be careful on the road. Arcane Holiday Paradise. This is the most popular seaside tourist attraction in the entire Fiori Kingdom. There is not only an amusement park with Mining University where customers can have fun. There are also high-end hotels where you can eat and rest. And once you visit, you can't resist the charming beaches and the beautiful sea that connects to the sky. Without a doubt, this is a great place to relax and enjoy. Wow, so exciting. Above the waves, the scream of Lucy, who was surfing, instantly attracted a large number of people. Bang, one the waves crashed on the sea, and the thrilling sprint fell into a brief calm. Love, behind Lucy, Happy, let out a long sigh of relief. By the way, does this guy get dizzy even on a surfboard? Lucy looked away, grabbing Gray's surfboard tightly. Natsu, who swung his lower body in the sea with his mouth bulging and white-eyed, complained. Well, just get used to it. This guy's just like that. 35, Gray shook his head indifferently. His eyes looked at the waves that began surging in front of him, immediately excited, shouting to Lucy, who was not far away and sharing a surfboard with Happy, it's coming, it's coming. But I haven't slowed down yet. Love, stop, stop. Vomit on the edge of the beach. Huge sun umbrellas shaded the scorching sun directly above. Luo Xingchen, who didn't go surfing with Natsu and others, was lying comfortably on the deck chair at the moment. The lower body is wearing black breeches, and the upper body is naked after a long absence. The muscular outline of the golden ratio is revealed. The cool figure walking around constantly did not affect Luo Xingchen in the slightest. Wearing sunglasses, he glanced at the magazine in his hand from time to time. From time to time, take a look at the endless ocean in the distance. Or take a sip of the iced milk on the wooden table beside it. Summer, sun, sand, ocean, and iced milk. There's nothing more comfortable in this world. Behind him, under the huge coconut tree, a blue-haired girl in a blue bikini. He was cautiously sticking out his head. His eyes were fixed on the figure in front of him. It didn't move for a second. Lord Xingchen's figure, so perfect, seems to have thought of something. The pale cheeks instantly turned red. Hey, is that the girl named Mira Jane who has been with Lord Xingchen all the time? His eyes noticed the figure walking towards Luo Xingchen. Juvia murmured softly. Now, the sudden shadows blocked the direct sunlight from the front. Raising his head in doubt, he saw Mira Jane's smiling face. Then looked down. Luo Xingchen was stunned for a moment, then stood up from the reclining chair. Mira Jane put her hands behind her back and looked at Luo Xingchen's staring eyes under her sunglasses. Slightly shy, but after thinking of a certain figure who will appear here soon, Mira Jane instantly calmed down. He smiled and said, "Does it look good?" "Okay, good looking." With a slight nod, Luo Xingchen hurriedly glanced into the distance. Do not know why. At this moment, Luo Xingchen is a little nervous when he speaks. Indeed, as Luo Xingchen said, Mira Jane looks amazing today. Mira Jane's perfectly framed figure was accentuated by the extremely bold white 1.1 lace swimsuit, and it echoes the long, silvery white, supple hair scattered on the back. Unlike the previous high ponytail, today's Mira Jane is just a braid of her forehead bangs. It looks surprisingly cute. However, there was a malicious smile on the corner of his mouth. Make it look like a charming angel, not a demon. Playfully changed the position, Mira Jane came to Luo Xingchen again. His cheeks bulged slightly as if angry. Reaching out, Luo Xingchen took off the sunglasses hanging on the bridge of his nose. Then he leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the slightly red face in front of him. Very rare. Xingchen, you actually blush. Are you shy? Or afraid of staring at me? The slightly provocative words. It made Luo Xingchen's heart beat violently. He stared at the attractive face in front of him. Luo Xingchen secretly swallowed his saliva. I can't stand it. Chapter 180, For Mira Jane's Tenderness. I didn't expect you to have such a side. Looking at Luo Xingchen in front of him, Mira Jane lightly covered the raised corners of her mouth. Those aggressive eyes swept up and down the person in front of him recklessly. With a handsome face and a height of about 1.8 meters. And the most attractive perfect muscle, the skin is not very white. But just fine for men. The more she looked, the more shocked Mira Jane became. No matter what angle you look at, all seem to be perfect. It seems that there are no flaws in this man. Of course, in the eyes of Mira Jane at the moment, nobody is perfect. However, there's always someone who can ignore your shortcomings and infinitely magnify your advantages. Hey, did I say you were too close? A familiar voice came suddenly. The two who were a little embarrassed were interrupted. It also completely angered Mira Jane. He turned his head angrily and looked at Urza, who was walking towards him behind him. He folded his arms, curled his lips, and said, Who am I to be? Isn't this Urza? Aren't you still struggling with what swimsuit to wear? Although it's a little tangled, it's done. Urza looked down at his attire and spoke slowly. Urza's words also attracted Luo Xingchen's attention. Suddenly, the pupils shrank slightly. Originally thought, with Urza's character, it is estimated that she will dress conservatively, like a one-piece swimsuit or something. But never imagined, since Urza has also changed into a pure black swimsuit similar to Mira Jane. Long crimson hair fell on his shoulders. The bangs covered one side of the eyes, but it brought a hint of mystery to look forward to. The diamond-shaped earrings like gems shimmer in the sunlight. The long snow-white legs that are not much different from Mira Jane are particularly attractive. How about Luo Xingchen seemed to be watching. A shy look rose on Urza's face, and he lowered his head slightly and asked, It's very beautiful. Luo Xingchen nodded lightly and praised. The blue-haired girl hiding behind the coconut tree covered her lips with one hand in pain. You Juvia. Juvia also wants Lord Xingchen to comment. The other palm grabbed the tree trunk involuntarily. Boom, the trunk was directly caught out of pothole. No, Juvia can't stand it anymore. Just appeared directly in front of Lord Xingchen. With this thought in mind, Juvia summoned up her courage, getting ready to take a step. But it was interrupted by shouts not far away. Stars! Urza! Miss Mira! Now that everyone is here, let's play volleyball. Lucy's shout caught the eyes of Luo Xingchen. Cast your sight. I saw that at this moment Lucy and Natsu and others found a volleyball from nowhere. He was shaking his arms in this direction. Want to go? Luo Xingchen looked at the two of them. Come on, now that you're here, just relax, Urza said. Then I want to team up with Xingchen. Mira Jane said immediately. What are you thinking? You didn't say you were going to form a team. Urza hits Mira Jane without hesitation, then turned around and walked away. Urza, I think it's up to you. Mira Jane chased after him not to be outdone. Luo Xingchen shrugged helplessly. His eyes turned to the rear. Immediately, a panicked blue figure quickly hid behind the coconut tree. He narrowed his eyes slightly. Recently, I feel that someone is following me and others. However, He did not feel any malice. I'm just a fan of someone, so I don't care too much. Luo Xingchen also turned around and walked in the direction of the crowd. Oh really? Why is Juvia? Why is it so cowardly? Juvia, who was hiding behind the coconut tree, clutched at her dark blue curly hair in annoyance, full of regrets. Before sticking his head out, Luo Xingchen had already left. Immediately, Juvia's inner remorse became more intense. Boom, boom, boom. A violent roar resounded on the volleyball court on the beach. Mira, pick it up. Urza slammed the volleyball at the speeding volleyball. Didn't you eat, Urza? Mira Jane didn't show weakness and slapped the flying volleyball back with her palm. Natsu, watch out. Looking at the volleyball that went off track, Urza yelled at Natsu on the edge. Hee, no problem. Natsu grinned. Taking a step, he caught up with the volleyball and hit it back. Very good, watch my smash. Gray jump high, his arm muscles burst, and then slapped it hard. The volleyball flew towards Luo Xingchen's position with great speed. It's fun, it should be me next. Lucy on Mira Jane's side was eager to try. Lucy, I think you'd better not get involved. Happy sat on the sidelines and kindly discouraged. Huh? What? Since we're here to play, of course we have to have fun together. Lucy retorted with his hands on his hips. Then he shouted at Luo Xingchen, who was about to catch the ball. Stars! Here, here! While shouting, he kept gesturing his direction. Lucy's shout caught Luo Xingchen. Then take it easy. Aiming at the rapidly falling volleyball, Luo Xingchen jumped up slightly. The range of arm swings is much smaller. Boom, with a crisp sound, the volleyball flew out instantly. He flew quickly in Lucy's direction. Very well, next it's up to me. Lucy's mouth lifted into an excited smile. Stepping towards the direction of the volleyball, I ran over. Lucy smash, with the name of the move that is full of shame. Lucy jumped high and touched the flying volleyball. Lucy's pupils shrank abruptly when he just touched the volleyball. In an instant, Lucy was directly hit by the volleyball dozens of meters away, quickly to fly past in front of Happy, then hit the beach. Look, I said, Lucy, you'd better not get involved in their ball games. Happy shrugged helplessly. They are monsters. Looking at the crowd, Happy came to this conclusion. Woo you. Didn't say it earlier. You dead cat. Lucy whimpered in the distance. The time is approaching dusk. Natsu and the others have already left for the dry rice. Urza and Lucy seemed tired and returned to the hotel, planning to rest for a while. And Luo Xingchen, who had been playing crazy all day, was still lying on the reclining chair. His eyes were fixed on the end of the sea, the junction with the sky, where the setting sun is emitting orange 747 yellow light, sprinkled on the sea, reflecting a peaceful atmosphere. Xingchen, ice milk. Behind her, Mira Jane walked over with the ice milk and handed it to Luo Xingchen. Thank you, Mila. Luo Xingchen took it with a smile. Afterwards, Mira Jane naturally lay down on the reclining chair next to Luo Xingchen. Put your hands behind your head. The same look at the sunset in the distance. It's so beautiful. For a long time, she let out an inexplicable sigh. Yeah. Luo Xingchen nodded lightly. Mira Jane, who received the response, turned her head and looked at Luo Xingchen, who was close at hand. He said softly, not only is the scenery beautiful, Luo Xingchen was taken aback by the inexplicable words. Turning his head, he met Mira Jane's eyes. What kind of look is that? It is different from fierceness, arrogance, or arrogance at any time. Yes, but never seen before, gentle, like the surging water waves ahead, it is breathtaking. The corners of his mouth twitched into a smile. Luo Xingchen reached out and gently stroked the long silver hair. Before he could retract it, Mira Jane grabbed his arm tightly. Then he arched his body forward and leaned his head lightly on the sturdy arm. Luo Xingchen's body suddenly stiffened. The open palm hung in the air for a while, and then slowly stroked Mira Jane's right shoulder. Suddenly, Mira Jane raised a happy smile on the corner of her mouth and closed her eyes gently. For a while, the scene was incomparably quiet, only the sound of breathing evenly between the two of them, and, not far behind, the voice of a certain blue-haired girl gnashing her teeth. Chapter 185, Urza's Nightmare. Sudden attack inside an upscale hotel. Urza was lying on a sun lounger on the balcony of his hotel room after a crazy day. Enjoy the orange light of the dusk sprinkled on your body to the fullest, although they are enjoying the light of the sunset. However, Urza prefers to rest in a quiet place with no other strangers. Therefore, Urza chose to return to the hotel. Today is really a happy day. He put his hands behind his head. The quiet and casual atmosphere allowed Urza to gradually relax both physically and mentally. Fatigue gradually came over me. The lids of Urza's eyes gradually became heavy, and he seemed to fall into a deep sleep. Urza, the freedom you enjoy is false. This world, there is no freedom. That nightmare-like voice resounded again. That's something Urza couldn't escape, couldn't dodge, even. Unforgettable voice. Scene after scene is reappearing. As if being there, Urza was taken to the past. What catches the eye, what enters the ear, what is touched. It's all panic, crying, pain, lamentation, and despair. Yes, the children who grew up in that place experienced nothing but despair. There is no hope. Urza is like that, and so are others. Don't. Urza snapped his eyes open. His chest rose and fell violently, and the sweat on his forehead even soaked through the long crimson hair. He raised his hands and looked at the clenched fists unconsciously. Urza finally let out a sigh of relief. So it's a dream. Looking into the distance, the sunset has disappeared, and the night gradually begins to infect the day. Did I fall asleep? Unknowingly. Urza stood up, and the restless heart gradually recovered. Squeak. The closed door was slowly opened. What caught my eye were Luo Xingchen and Mira Jane, who were carrying large and small bags. What's wrong with you? He seemed to notice Urza, who was sweating profusely at the moment. Luo Xingchen asked with some doubts. No, just had a dream. Urza shook her head slightly. Indicate that you are all right. Is it a nightmare? Careful Mira Jane guessed it immediately. Hearing the words, Urza was slightly taken aback. Then he shook his head. It seems that I still can't fool you. Sighing lightly, Luo Xingchen stepped forward. He helped smooth the long crimson hair that was clinging to his forehead because of the dampness. Is it about the Tower of Heaven? A soft whisper entered Urza's ears. Suddenly, Urza's eyes widened. He looked at Luo Xingchen. You, the president, told me. Luo Xingchen interrupted Urza's words. Although knowing Urza's past, but Makarov really said that. After all, Makarov who knows Urza's past. Of course, I know that there is still an unknown Tower of Heaven surviving in the world. Therefore, at some point, someone was given a mission to sail with the sea. Makarov will ask for help to keep an eye on everything about Tower of Heaven. It's not the first time I've said it, but you have to remember that you're not alone. 35 looking at the crimson girl in front of him, Luo Xingchen spoke slowly. Ah, Urza smiled slightly. He took a step forward and hugged Luo Xingchen's body. He rested his head lightly on that broad chest. Looking at this scene, Mira Jane, who was behind her, was rarely disturbed. Just smiled slightly. Didn't say much. After a long time, the two separated, and Mira Jane lifted the bag that Yang was carrying. Because you fell asleep before, Xingchen didn't let me disturb you. However, I brought you something to eat. Let's eat first. I didn't see it. You still have such kindness. Looking at Mira Jane, Urza said aloud, Huh, it said that Xingchen packaged it, so I'm too lazy to care about you. Mira Jane shook her head in disdain. Urza's smile grew even brighter. Then thanks Xingchen and... Thanks, Mira. Taking the food that Mira Jane brought, Urza thanked softly. Cut. Mira Jane still wrapped her arms around her and looked around. It's just that the corner of her mouth that was gradually unable to be suppressed had already betrayed her. Inside the underground casino in Akane's holiday paradise. As the best resort hotel in the kingdom, even the underground casino is full of fun. It's not just about the extremely rare underground roller coasters. There are also various chess games, as well as lucky lottery machines. There are even magic conductors to play games, and so on. Countless. Chess area. At the moment, Urza and Mira Jane are sitting on the round table. They glared at each other. You better give up. Your chips are not my opponent at all. 33 Urza spoke first. Huh. Mira Jane gave Urza a strange look. It's impossible to lose to you if you lose to anyone. Stop talking nonsense. Let's play. Umph. Urza smiled disdainfully. Open his trump card. Flush. Urza is amazing. Lucy, who was watching the battle, immediately echoed loudly. I'm having good luck today. Urza looked at Mira Jane, who was a little stunned at the moment. You still admit defeat. Damn it. How is that possible? Mira Jane scratched her head in dismay. He slapped the table, glared at Urza, and said, Come again. No matter how many times, I can beat you. Can beat Mira Jane in a row. At this moment, Urza's mood is abnormally overstepped. He looked at the croupier and said, Deal the cards. They didn't notice that behind them, a figure with an evil smile was slowly approaching. On the other side, the lottery area. Natsu and Happy slapped the lucky lottery machine in front of them, tears streaming down their face. Number 17, obviously the number 17 has already been issued. Why has it changed again? This VIP, is it necessary to cry like this? He looked at Natsu and Happy in front of him. The waiter sighed helplessly. My number 17, number 17. Natsu kept shouting. Love, I already have it. Happy also collapsed. Enough is enough, brat. 55, a voice caught the attention of Natsu and Happy. You should have fun like a gentleman in an adult's playground. The square man in a straight suit was sitting on a chair not far away and looked here. Huh, Boxy. Natsu and Happy looked at each other. The confusion in his eyes is so clear. The man ignored Natsu and Happy, as surprise, and continued talking to himself. Boy, let me tell you a good thing. 99, he stretched out 2 fingers. The magic power surged all over the body, and the lower body broke away from the body, forming 2 large squares in midair, attached to Natsu's body and firmly fixed to the wall. Who are you, BD? Natsu asked. Natsu, Happy, immediately spread its wings and flew in front of Natsu. Tried to force the block away, but to no avail. To live like a gentleman, Zhao Duan didn't bother. The raised finger pointed to Natsu. Between the flashes of light, the building blocks were quickly spliced into a sniper rifle. Scarlet infrared was aimed at the top of Natsu's head. Or stop and die. 35 on the other side, the play area. Gray playing chess. He turned away Luo Xingchen, who was engrossed in the electric game behind him. Helplessly shook his head. I didn't expect that fellow Xingchen would actually like to play games. What a surprise. It's your turn. Hurry up. 33 when Gray was complaining. The opponent's urging sound rang out to make up. When did you take my army? Gray looked at the chessboard and suddenly exclaimed. Not far away. Luo Xingchen stared intently at the villain on the magic crystal screen in front of him. The hands are constantly dancing on the gamepad. Even his teeth were biting his lower lip unconsciously because of the tense game. Da. There were crisp footsteps behind him. That, Lord Xingchen. Chapter 186. The betrayed companion's the voice behind Luo Xingchen stopped moving his fingers. He looked back suspiciously. Azure blue dress, azure curly hair, and the woman with the golden fairy tale pendant hanging on her chest entangled her hands. Walk slowly. That. Juvia also followed. Seemingly shy, Juvia even spoke intermittently. Juvia. Luo Xingchen was a little surprised when he saw the figure in front of him. Yes, Lord Xingchen, you can remember me. Juvia really feels. He heard Luo Xingchen call out his name. Juvia was suddenly incoherent with excitement. That. Our age is not too different. You don't need to use honorifics. Luo Xingchen twitched the corners of his mouth. The name always make Luo Xingchen feel like he has become an elder or something. Okay, Lord Xingchen. Juvia smiled and nodded. Then he pointed to the vacant seat beside him and asked, Can Juvia sit here? There's no one here. You can do it yourself. After speaking, Luo Xingchen turned his eyes to the screen. The fingers of both hands that had stopped began to operate again. Got a permit. Juvia immediately sat beside Luo Xingchen with a smile on her face. He turned his gaze to the figure beside him. That side face that was fully absorbed in the game, without making Juvia's heart beat faster. After all, for the first time, Oh no, it should be the second time that I have approached the object of my most adoration so closely. Even the side face is so perfect. The little deer in my heart is rambling wildly. Cheeks began to redden at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. He gently covered his cheeks. Juvia looked at the magic crystal screen in front of Luo Xingchen. As if thinking of something, he immediately asked, 750, Lord Xingchen, Juvia can play this game too. Can we play together? Huh? Would you do too? Juvia's strategy was successful, listening to the voice ringing in his ears. She nodded hurriedly and said expectantly, Yes, is that okay? In that case, saying that, Luo Xingchen got up and picked up another handle and handed it to Juvia. However, I have just come into contact with this, and some are not very good at playing, so don't dislike it. Something seemed to come to mind, Luo Xingchen explained. It's okay, it's okay. Juvia will never despise Lord Xingchen. Juvia immediately waved her hand and spoke anxiously. Then the game begins. Luo Xingchen smiled. He turned his attention to the magic crystal screen. Jubby, Lord Star just smiled at Juvia. Smile. Although it was just a polite smile, it made Juvia's heart suddenly burst. Hold the gamepad in your hand like a treasure, he said with unprecedented seriousness. Juvia will definitely work hard. Chess area. Urza of damn it. Mira Jane grabbed the only remaining green chip in her hand. The angry face looked a little grim. Lucy, who was watching the battle, was full of cold sweat. Lower your head as much as possible to reduce your presence. After all, no one dared to mess with a Mira Jane who had lost to Urza a dozen times. Nobody. You better go to sleep, Mira. Urza put the chips in the center of the table back in front of him, opening with a smile. You can't beat me. Those wild words made Mira Jane's anger climb to the top. A hole. The dealer changed. 33, just when the two looked at each other. Another voice came from the poker table. Whoever deals the cards, I win. Urza still looked at Mira Jane. He spoke without turning his head. Don't be too arrogant. Urza, 55, but in exchange, Mira Jane gritted her teeth. Seeing this, Urza seemed even more happy. If that's the case, shouldn't our stake be higher, sister? The words that continued to sound made Urza's smile instantly stop. Eyes widened. He turned his head slowly. He looked at the dark-skinned figure standing on a shooting table. Pupils shrink sharply. Hugh. Urza said the name of the person in front of him in an unbelievable voice. Just risk your life, Sister Urza. The corner of Hua's mouth raised a smile. Said, long time no see, sister. 99, eh? Sister. Lucy looked at Urza suspiciously. I said, who are you? Mira Jane, who was already upset. Turning his head over, his tone was not very good. But Hugh seemed to ignore Mira Jane's thoughts, just staring at Urza, who was gradually starting to tremble at this moment. So you're fine. Urza's words were broken. It seems to be afraid, in fear. Are you safe? Hua leaned forward, his eyes full of hatred, making Urza's trembling worse. Oh no, Urza didn't seem to know how to answer. Boom! The violent clapping of the table startled everyone present. Mira Jane stood up straight from her seat. Looking at the figure in front of him, his tone was extremely low. Although I don't know what's going on, but you don't seem to have come with good intentions. Out of the corner of the eye, he glanced at the trembling Urza. Mira Jane's face darkened even more. She had never seen Urza show that face, showing this timid look. This made Mira Jane, who was called the Devil, very upset. Although I want to see Urza's embarrassment, but that can only be self-inflicted. Others, no way. However, Hugh has no intention of wasting time with people outside Urza, CCBB. Pulled out a card from the table. As the magic circle flickered, Mira Jane was directly enveloped in light. Immediately after, in Lucy's surprised eyes, Mira Jane's figure disappeared. Miss Mira, Lucy exclaimed suddenly. Aim! With the sudden sound of a cat meowing, a magic circle flashed under Lucy's feet. Immediately afterwards, the rope that came out of the magic circle directly tied Lucy. What's the matter? Lucy frowned as he felt the tightening rope. Miliana, Urza recognized the magician. Looking not far away, the one with cat ears and a yellow jacket. A figure with a cat's whisker outlined with red lines on his cheek was walking slowly. Spreading her hands, Miliana said with a smile, "Long time no see. Little Urza." "You." Urza took 2 steps back involuntarily. Then he reacted immediately and said, "Let Mila and Lucy go. They are my companions." "Companion?" Miliana looked at Urza unexpectedly. "Aren't we also companions once?" Zio said, gritting his teeth. The anger in Zio's eyes seemed to overflow. Whispered, "Before you betray us, sister." Urza crossed his hands unconsciously and lowered his head. The trembling of the body became more intense. Companion betrayal? Lucy looked at Urza in disbelief. Although still a newbie, however, Lucy could never believe that Urza would be the one who could betray his companions. The sudden vibration made Shio stunned. He looked at the card that sealed Mira Jane. At this moment, the crack appeared above. How was that possible? Looking at this scene, Zio couldn't understand at all. Click! It sounded like glass breaking. The cards in Hugh's hand instantly shattered into countless pieces of paper. And Mira Jane, who should have been imprisoned in it, has appeared in front of him at this moment. With a wave of his hand, the surging magic power turned into pitch-black claws. "Cut the rope that binds Lucy." A deep voice echoed, "I don't care who you are or what happened to you. But Urza is definitely not a traitor. Now she is my companion, and my enemy if you want to touch her." 35 boom 1 dash. The violent magic directly shattered the wine glass on the table. The spilled red wine is as red as blood. The ghost has been disbanded. What are you going to do next? In the lounge of the game area, Luo Xingchen was drinking milk, looking at Juvia and asking, Juvia, want to join the fairy tale?" Juvia clasps her hands together, eyes with anticipation. "Join fairy tale?" Luo Xingchen put the milk glass in his hand on the table. After pondering for a while, he said, "If you want to, it depends on the opinion of the president. After all, that kind of thing happened before. I'm afraid there will be some investigations to determine if you have other purposes. Although I know that in the original work, Juvia has successfully joined fairy tale. However, after all, he was a wizard who once belonged to a ghost. There must be some inspections." Seeing hope, Juvia smiled brighter and said, "Juvia will do anything." "You can't say such things casually," Luo Xingchen corrected. Luo Xingchen, right between the two of them talking. A tall man with a white turban on his head and armor wrapped around his chin came to the two of them. Seems to be the target. The tall man didn't say anything more. The magic circle unfolds instantly. Boom! The violent explosion made the surrounding crowd instantly panic. Chapter 187. Is it just such an ordinary blow? Click, click. The rubble that fell from the explosion hit the ground with a crisp sound. And the initiator of all this, the tall man, looked at the smoke that was constantly filling his eyes. He narrowed his eyes slightly. His eyes were complicated, as if he was expecting something. Suddenly, as if he heard something, the tall man's eyes flickered. Looking at the shadow gradually emerging from the smoke, the corners of his mouth rose slightly. At this moment, in the posture of a princess hug, Luo Xingchen, who was holding Juvia, slowly walked out of the smoke. There were no injuries on their bodies due to the sudden explosion just now. It's just stained with a little dust. Obviously, at the critical moment just now, Luo Xingchen took Juvia directly to avoid the center of the explosion and used magic to completely cancel the aftermath. Only have this scene. Only there was something unusual about Juvia being held. Feel the hands wrapping around your waist and the crook of your legs. Juvia's face was as red as an apple. The glittering eyes stared at the handsome face close at hand. Just now, Lord Xingchen saved Juvia again. Could it be that Lord Xingchen has fallen in love with Juvia? Juvia is so shy, this thought popped into my mind unconsciously. Juvia could clearly feel his heart was beating wildly. But the warmth didn't last long. He was interrupted by the shadow on the other side. Fairy tale, Luo Xingchen, is known as the trump card of the guild. He alone has wiped out many dark guilds, and he also has the strength to rival or even defeat the Holy Ten. The tall men described Luo Xingchen's record one by one. The smile on the corners of the mouth is even more excited. The pupils gradually turn scarlet. Then let me test how strong you are, 5 dong dong. A voice from nowhere announced the coming of darkness. In an instant, the entire underground playground fell into darkness. And Luo Xingchen and Juvia also directly lost the vision of the tall man. What's going on? Juvia exclaimed. This is a kind of magic of the dark system. Dark moment, as if the voices from all around seemed to interfere with Luo Xingchen and Juvia's judgment. Behind the two, the tall man appeared silently and raised his hands. The dark magic circle unfolded in an instant. Gone! Juvia's pupils narrowed. Just as she was about to remind Luo Xingchen to be careful around Juvia, she was suddenly released. Luo Xingchen? With doubt and regret, the body fell straight to the ground. At the same time, Luo Xingchen, who had freed his hands, seemed to have noticed the figure behind him. He turned around and looked at the tall man. The right foot has already been lifted up, aiming at the belly of the tall man and kicking it violently. Boom! Ugh! The dull sound was accompanied by the pained cry of the tall man. It was just a simple kick, but because of the huge force, a gust of wind was directly generated and countless sand and dust were rolled up in waves, and the gravel poured out towards the surroundings. The tall man who was kicked in the front bowed violently. The bloodshot eyes protruded, the mouth grew involuntarily, and the blood mixed with vomit flew in the air. All of this just happened in an instant. The magic of the dark moment has disappeared. Juvia, who had regained the light, only saw a tall body, flying towards the rear at an extremely fast speed. The ultra-high speed even cut through the air, causing a piercing sound. Boom! Eventually smashed the thick walls of the play area. I just lost consciousness and didn't move. Is it just such an ordinary blow? Juvia covered her mouth in surprise. Although I don't know how strong this tall man is. However, judging from the performance just now, it is definitely not weak. But such a person, but even Luo Xingchen can't handle such an ordinary kick. Hey, what happened? Just when Juvia was horrified, not far from the game area, Gray also noticed the commotion happening here. He hurried to this side. It's nothing, just being attacked suddenly. I stared at the tall man who had fallen into a faint. Luo Xingchen shook his head. Assault. Gray was taken aback. Then his eyes noticed Juvia, who was following Luo Xingchen. Isn't this guy one of the 4 elements of ghosts? Yes, my name is Juvia, Mr. Xingchen's companion. Hello, Mr. Gray. Juvia bowed slightly, introduced herself, and greeted politely. Hello. Gray responded. He looked at Luo Xingchen again. Why is she here? If I want to join Fairy Tale, I might be a companion in the future. Luo Xingchen replied, ignoring Gray's surprise. Then he looked outside the game area and said in a deep voice, the other party is a targeted attack, and Natsu may have met people there. You go there and see. I will go to Urza and Mira. Natsu, I see. Gray nodded. Without hesitation, he immediately ran in the direction of Natsu. Then it should be no problem for Juvia to follow Lord Xingchen. Juvia put his hands behind his back, said, after all, Juvia was once one of the 4 elements, and can also fight. Hearing this, Luo Xingchen turned his head and stared at Juvia for a moment. He nodded. Let's come together then. Saying that, Luo Xingchen came to the tall man. He picked it up and walked towards the chess and card area. Okay, Juvia will try. In place, Juvia clenched her fists, her face full of excitement. This is the first time to fight side by side with Lord Xingchen. Juvia must not have any slack, 5 as he muttered to himself. Juvia chased after the voice in front of him. Time went back to 3 minutes ago. Natsu, who was restrained by the full-body square man, just wanted to fight back. The surrounding light was instantly deprived and plunged into darkness. Even Happy, who is close at hand, can't see Natsu's figure. Damn it. What the hell is going on? 39. I can't see anything. The inexplicable environment and the inexplicable attack made Natsu extremely irritable. Natsu, where are you? From the darkness came the cry of Happy. I'm here. Happy, you're there. Natsu responded immediately, but thus exposed his position in the dark. Because of the darkness, the cube man, who had just lost Natsu's vision, smiled slightly. The sniper rifle in his hand was aimed at the position where the sound came from. The infrared rays locked onto Nat Su's eyebrows again. "Good night, boy." The gentleman's words sounded, but they completely angered Nat Su. A whole guy. He opened his mouth angrily, and the fiery magic power began to gather in his mouth. Fire dragons, boom. But the sudden resounding sound of gunfire was faster. The darkness disappears, and the light returns. Nat Su, who had been fastened to the wall, fell to the ground. The mouth opened wide, and bursts of blue smoke rose from the mouth. Nat Su, happy. S pupil shrank slightly. "Is there another cat?" "It just happened to be a pet from Miliana." The 35-square man smiled. "Exactly like a gentleman." At this moment, a few words came to my mind. The information in it made the elegant face that Duan Nan had always maintained completely darkened. Hugh and Miliana have encountered a strong enemy. Simon has lost contact. Have you all failed in your mission? Looking at Nat Su in front of him, the square man frowned slightly. In his mind, he responded, "I see. Plan goal change." B. Chapter 188. In order to hit Jalal Bang. 1. A terrifying explosion exploded in the chest and card area. Dark black magic slanted crazily around. The two figures flew out with the violent explosion, smashed hard against the wall. Cough, cough. "Miliana, are you okay?" Zio covered his chest in pain. He looked at Miliana, who was on the side. At the moment, Miliana is not feeling well either. The severe pain that came from her whole body made her face extremely hideous. With Zio's support, he stood up staggeringly. The eyes looked forward. Pure black wings fanned in midair. A scarlet leather tunic enveloped Mira Jane's slender frame. Hands transformed into demon claws. The black lightning-like stripes running through the right eye set off the tyrannical atmosphere. "Magic Mira Jane, is that strong?" Miliana said with difficulty. "Damn it. With her, I can't take my sister." Even Zio frowned tightly. "Is that so?" Mira Jane held out her demonic claws. 750. The tone was sarcastic. The claws were facing the two people in front, and the magic burst out. A dark purple magic circle spread out in the open palm. "Damn it. Retreat first." Hugh made a decision immediately. He took out a small teleportation magic ball from his arms. This was given to them by Jalal before this mission began, in order to be able to get out of the body after successfully capturing Urza. I just didn't expect it to be used at this time. However, there is no time to hesitate now. Hugh crushed the magic ball. Immediately, the teleportation magic circle unfolded above the two of them. The two were shrouded and the magic circle disappeared directly in front of everyone's eyes. "Want to run?" Mira Jane retracted her arm. His eyes locked on the direction of the sea for the first time. "Where?" The sudden surge of magic is as dazzling as a pearl in the dark night. "Don't underestimate my chasing speed." 35. With that said, Mira Jane flapped her wings and planned to pursue her. "But Mira, that's enough." Mira Jane's movements were interrupted by Urza's sudden voice. Surprisingly, he looked at Urza, who had been stunned behind him for a long time. "Just let them go," Mira Jane asked in confusion. "They used to be my companions. I don't know what to do." The words were still incoherent, and the body was still shaking. The fear is still not dispelled. Urza, looking at Urza at the moment. Lucy pursed her lips, her eyes a little distressed. "Oh, it's all right, let it go, they're not that strong anyway." Mira Jane shook her head helplessly. Between the twinkling of light, the original white dress decoration was restored. With arms folded, watching Urza, she didn't seem to know what to say to make her feel better. "Urza, Mila, and Lucy, are you all right?" At this moment, Luo Xingchen's voice came from behind. "Stars." Looking at the person who came, Mira Jane finally raised a smile. However, when he saw Juvia following him, but frowned slightly, "She's not that. One of the 4 elements of ghosts." Lucy answered, "Don't worry. She is no longer an enemy." Luo Xingchen waved his hand. "Yes, Juvia really wants to join Fairy Tale now. So please don't dislike Juvia. I'm really sorry for what happened before." Juvia immediately explained and apologized while speaking. "It's okay. That matter is already past. Since the stars believe in you, we won't say anything. Mira Jane waved her hand. Obviously, don't care. A smile gradually settled on Juvia's face, and she said loudly, "Thank you for believing, Lord Mira Jane." Huh? Don't use honorifics, it sounds weird. Mira Jane shrugged. It's all right. Juvia was still smiling. In the past few days of observation, Juvia has discovered that the relationship between Mira Jane and Urza and Luo Xingchen is definitely not ordinary. It can almost be counted as the first and second positions. Therefore, as a newcomer, Juvia felt that he should please the two of them. As for the other girls, all are competitors, competing for third place. Like Lucy in front of me. He seemed to have noticed Juvia's resentful eyes. Lucy blinked oddly. On the other hand, Luo Xingchen also noticed Urza, who was in a bad mood at the moment. Stepping to her side, Xingchen, he noticed the figure in front of him. Urza raised his head slightly. The weakness that never showed, clearly reflected in Luo Xingchen's pupils. It also ignited Luo Xingchen's anger faintly. Not much to say. He just gently reached out and stroked the crimson long hair. But the familiar temperature seemed to warm Urza's restless heart. At this moment, the tall man who was thrown on the ground by Luo Xingchen murmured softly. The tightly closed eyes began to tremble. Simon. Urza recognized the tall man. It seemed that he heard his own name. Simon opened his eyes slowly. But even now, the severe abdominal pain is still spreading. It made Simon extremely miserable. With one hand stroking his abdomen, Simon forced himself to stand up. He glanced around and seemed to understand his situation. He smiled bitterly. With a long sigh, he looked at Urza and said, "Long time no see." Urza, Lord Urza, be careful. This guy is the enemy. 35, watching Simon facing Urza. Juvia immediately reminded. Hearing Juvia's words, Simon sighed and said, "Don't worry, I didn't mean anything." But Juvia wanted to say something more, but he was stopped by Luo Xingchen. He shook his head slightly, indicating that Juvia was all right. At this moment, perhaps because of the fact that his companion is by his side, he is facing his former companion. Urza also lost his previous fears. Staring at Simon, "Long time no see you. Why are you here? Why are you attacking us?" "It's Jalal's order," Simon replied. "The Tower of Heaven has been built, so Jalal ordered us to take you back." Tower of Heaven. Urza instantly froze when he heard the term. His eyes widened sharply, and his pupils were constantly trembling. That thing. Has it been built yet? Tower of Heaven. Lucy frowned slightly. Said, "I seem to have seen records of this thing. It is said that it is a forbidden magic that goes against humanity, right?" She looked at everyone. Luo Xingchen nodded lightly. The so-called Tower of Heaven, alias our system, is to sacrifice a large number of living sacrifices in exchange for the magic of resurrecting a dead man. What a bunch of lunatics. Mira Jane made a brief judgment. Lucy nodded in agreement. Also, the person Jalal wants to resurrect should not be a simple person, right? Luo Xingchen looked at Simon and said, "Speaking of this," Simon's 1.1 expression gradually became solemn. The legendary Black Mage, known as the most ferocious and evil Black Mage in the history of the wizarding world Zerif. 35 Simon's voice just fell, and the scene instantly fell into silence. "Wait, you're not talking about that, Zerif." Lucy's eyes widened in disbelief. Simon nodded to confirm Lucy's thoughts. Shun Sheng said, "To revive such a terrifying guy will only bring an absolutely unimaginable disaster to the world." 35, therefore. Simon's eyes swept across the crowd. Slowly said, "So, I have been waiting for the moment when you group of powerful magicians gather." After a pause, Simon's tone became extremely serious. Said to beat Jalal. Wait. Mira Jane, who had been frowning, interrupted Simon's words. Looking at Urza, "I've been wondering since the beginning, what the hell is going on with all this? Who are you?" Chapter 189, Scarlet Death, attacking the Tower of Heaven 10 years ago. A magical order that believes in dark magic to activate forbidden magic that can awaken the dead. and start building Tower of Heaven. But the building of the Tower of Heaven was not permitted by the Senate, unable to openly recruit labor force. So the Order of Dark Magic began to plunder manpower from everywhere. Elders, children, etc. Let them work as slaves. That's how Urza, who was 9 years old at the time, was caught in the tower. There, Urza met fellow slave Jalal, Hugh, Simon, Miliana, Wally the Cube, and a kind old grandfather named Rob. Rob used to be a sorcerer, so he has seen many outside worlds. During rest time, Rob always tells everyone about the strange world outside. And this also planted a seed of yearning for freedom for a kind of miserable children. However, there is no freedom in this tower. Some are just endless scolding and the sound of whipping. All of this further stimulates this group of children who yearn for freedom. They want to walk carefree on the vast land. I want to run freely under the blue sky. Want to learn magic. Want to fly like a bird. They long for such freedom. Finally, under that extreme oppression, they began to resist. At that time, 22 Jalal, the oldest and the most righteous among the group of children, became the leader of the crowd. War is imminent. The resistance of these people who, in Avatar's eyes, is just a group of slaves, is extremely fierce. It even suppressed Avatar for a time. But with the arrival of their magic soldiers, the tide of the war began to be reversed. The slaves fled everywhere. Under the attack of the magic soldiers, their resistance seemed so powerless. Even Jalal got caught. But young Urza didn't give up. She knew very well. If you don't fight, you can never win. However, despite her hard work, she was eventually targeted by the magic soldiers. The overwhelming magic missiles hit Urza, as if to wipe it out completely. However, the old man who led him to freedom stepped forward this time, stopped in front of Urza. A violent roar and a blazing fire illuminated the fairy-like coat of arms behind the old man. The old man, named Rob, used the afterglow of his life. With that thin body, it turned into an invincible barrier at a critical moment, and it opens up the infinite possibilities of Urza, anger, despair, lamentation. It eventually evolved into an extreme desire for freedom. That day, Urza cried bitterly. A hysterical cry seemed to resound throughout the Tower of Heaven. It also strengthened Urza's heart. Thus, the magic belonging to Urza was born. In just a split second, he controlled countless swords and defeated all the magic soldiers standing in front of her. Urza, who has mastered this power, has even begun to fantasize. It is with this power that true freedom can be found. But she didn't know that what awaited her was despair that was far more painful than now. Urza came to the place where Jalal was being held and rescued Jalal. However, at this time, Jalal did not know what happened. It's like a person has changed. He no longer needs that false freedom. The real freedom he needs is in Zirif's world. He sent out an invitation to Urza. Invite Urza to build the Tower of Heaven together to resurrect Zirif. Then go to the real free world. Undoubtedly, such a request was rejected by Urza. Jalal wasn't angry about this either. Instead, expelled Urza, let her enjoy the so-called false freedom, and threatening the lives of Hugh and others. Urza is not allowed to take a step closer to the Tower of Heaven. The rest of the ships were then blown up, and Urza was framed. This is to arouse the hatred of those who did not escape. Naturally, through people's anger, Jalal started promoting his twisted dreams. Only when Zirif is resurrected can they be truly free. Desperate people with no ships to flee have no choice, can only desperately grasp the faint hope. Attempt to be truly free. This is the secret Urza has been hiding for 10 years. Now, it has finally surfaced. Urza turned his head and looked at Simon. Actually, I haven't been able to save you. I'm really sorry. But Urza, you're doing it for them, Lucy said indignantly. Okay, Lucy. Urza interrupted Lucy. After a moment of silence, he said, at least from the results, I did betray them. What kind of betrayal is this? Mira Jane said angrily. Yes, the essence of this matter. Lord Urza is a victim. Juvia also spoke up. Look at the people who are filled with righteous indignation. Simon sighed. I actually know all this. I've always believed in Urza, and I've always believed that you're not a betrayal of your comrades. Speaking of this, the corners of Simon's mouth rose slightly. As I said just now, I have been waiting for your mighty group of mages to gather. For the sake of this day, I have also been pretending to be deceived by Jalal. Simon, Urza stared blankly at the figure in front of him. Thank you so much for believing in me. He took a deep breath. Urza refreshed her mood. Looking at the crowd, Urza's determination was spoken in a firm tone. This time, I won't be running away. I'm going Tower of Heaven to find Jalal for a break. You're not alone, Urza. Luo Xingchen, who was listening quietly, said. That's right. Can you do it without me? Mira Jane, who was standing on the side, put her arms around her arms and said. Juvia will try her best too. Juvia raised her small fist. If that's the case, then I'll go too. I can fight anyway. Lucy looked at Urza and said, You. Urza wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. Everyone, no good. Natsu got caught. At this moment, Gray, who was looking for Natsu, hurried in by himself. Shout out to the crowd. What? Above the endless sea, a small boat carrying Luo Xingchen and others is constantly floating on the sea. So, by the time you arrived at 750, Natsu and Happy had disappeared. The hurried crowd didn't have time to ask Gray for specifics until now. Gray nodded and took a note from his trouser pocket. This is a note found at the scene that not only said Natsu was taken away by them, but even marked the location of the Tower of Heaven for us. And also said that if you want to rescue Natsu, you have to go with Urza. 5. Listening to Gray's words, Luo Xingchen frowned slightly. Filled with doubts, he said, That guy Natsu, how? Did he get caught? Indeed, Luo Xingchen does not believe the cube-faced Wally can really take Natsu away. In the original book, Urza can be taken away, all because Urza didn't have the slightest fighting spirit. Although Natsu is weaker than Urza. But you won't be caught alive, will you? Who knows? Maybe he was attacked and knocked unconscious, Gray said, wrapping his arms around him. Don't they have that teleportation orb? Mira Jane said. It is possible that he was transported to the ship with him, and Natsu would not have the strength to resist. 35. Forget it. In short, we are going to the Tower of Heaven, and we also aim to destroy that place. It just so happens that the other party's actions also agree with us. Luo Xingchen interrupted the entanglement of several people. Shun Sheng said, Everything. Wait until Tower of Heaven is talking. Coming soon. Simon, who had been standing on the bow and grasping the direction, made a sound at this time. Indeed, as Simon said, everyone could already vaguely see the towering tower. Chapter 190. The roar of extreme ice, the battlefield that was emptied in an instant at the same time, the headquarters of the council, the ERA. A quarrel ensued. Several council members hurriedly pushed open the door of the conference room. Go everywhere. Obviously, he wanted to prepare something. Only Chikirian had a faint smile on his face. The meeting just now was called urgently by him. The reason for the meeting was the existence of Tower of Heaven. As the judges, it is natural to know what the Tower of Heaven does. Therefore, some people advocate sending troops to destroy the place. But Chikirian believes that there is only one way to destroy the place at this stage. That is to use the satellite magic circle to cast the magic spirit power. As a last resort of the Senate, the destructive power of the transcendental space-time destruction magic wizard power is unpredictable. A little carelessness can even completely destroy a small country. Therefore, to activate the magic spirit power, at least 5 members of the council need to vote for it. On one side is the forbidden magic that can awaken the dead. On one side is magic with unpredictable destructive power. Therefore, the two sides began to quarrel, but such a quarrel was broken by a remark revealed by Chikirian. Black Mage Zerif. That's right, the target that Tower of Heaven needs to resurrect is Zerif. As Jalal's twin brother, Chikirian's words, the judges had to consider the possibility. Therefore, the crowd was shaken. In the end, with the exception of the speaker who took leave, 8 votes in favor and 1 against. The magic spirit power will activate in half an hour. Such a situation made Yajima, the only one who voted against it, lamented. But things couldn't be stopped. Kiku. An old voice from behind called Chikurian. Mr. Yajima. Turning his head and looking at the person, Chikurian said softly, I know you've always disagreed, but I hope you understand that we have to stop Zerif's resurrection. I don't want to care. Yajima shook his head. Carrying his hands on his back, he stopped in front of Chikurian. Old eyes stared at the figure in front of him. But, can you really take all the blame? Facing the question like words, Chikurian's face changed. Without thinking too much, he said directly, Of course, I will definitely take all the responsibilities. 35 This sentence made Ajima completely angry. His eyes widened, bloodshots clearly visible. His face was also covered with blue veins from anger. I'm talking about the countless lives that are about to dissipate. From now on, you will carry the life of the victim on your back. Kiku, even in the face of that roaring words, Chikurian's face remained untouched. I know, and I'm willing to carry it. Even those countless grievances. The top of the Tower of Heaven. The figure shrouded in the hood slowly raised its head. The smile on the corner of the mouth is clearly visible. Sky blue hair oozes from the gap in the hood. The blue pattern that runs through the right eye is so conspicuous. Has the same appearance as Chikurian. The man called Jalao. The corners of his mouth twitched slightly. The countdown is approaching, raising your eyes through the huge French window in front of you. It seems to be able to see that on the endless ocean. One after the other is far apart, but they were both heading towards the two ships galloping here. Next, what should you do? 99, a soft whisper followed. Soon, the divine light will fall. At this moment, the first to arrive was the ship of Shio and others. By the way, is this guy really all right? Holding the happy, who was lethargic. Miliena looked a little worried and puffed out her mouth not far away. Natsu with tears in his eyes. Who knew a boy with sakura-colored hair would get seasick? Wally, the square man, spread his hands helplessly. He stroked his bulging right cheek. The square's face was rounded directly, which annoyed Wally for a while. Think back to just now. During the reading, I learned that there's a strong enemy on Urza's side, and when neither Hugh nor Miliena can match, several people immediately decided to change their plans. The goal is to bring Urza back to the Tower of Heaven anyway. Even if you can't catch it directly, if you use Natsu as bait, those people will definitely come. Wally left a note on the spot and picked up Natsu, who was briefly in a coma after being shot in the mouth by himself. Used the teleportation magic ball to come to the ship, reconciles with Hugh and Miliena. But who knew Natsu's recovery would be so fast? After being shot, only a minute had passed. Natsu has been restored to perfect condition. Natsu, who had just woken up, immediately launched a resistance, just one punch, and shot Wally straight from the ship to the sea. Also wants to keep killing Hugh and Miliena's Natsu, but forced to stop here. The moving ship made Natsu's strength dwindle. Then, under the surprised eyes of Hugh and Miliena, he collapsed gorgeously on the deck of the ship, gradually lost consciousness. Leave him alone. He's no threat with the help of Miliena's leash. Was said. Anyway, let's get ready quickly. Maybe after a while, Sister and the others will come. 35 listening to Zio's words, everyone nodded. He picked up Natsu and walked toward the Tower of Heaven. Not long after Zio and others left, the second ship arrived here quietly. Is this the Tower of Heaven? Lucy murmured as he looked at the huge, grotesque tower. Tower of Heaven. He looked at the behemoth in front of him. Urza's mood seemed a little unstable. Did I finally come back here? Let's go. Nightmares need to be faced. Just escaping won't solve the problem. Luo Xingchen said behind him. Xingchen is right, and the guy named Hugh should be here too. I was very upset just now. Mira Jane rubbed her fists. There was a crackling sound. However, the enemy's guards are too many. After all, Natsu and Happy are still in their hands, and they may be in danger if they start the snake. Lucy voiced his concerns. The situation is very unfavorable for us. Even Gray frowned slightly. Everyone, I have found the underwater passage to the tower. At this moment, Juvia, who had just approached the island and jumped into the water to investigate the situation, walked out of the sea excitedly talking about the results of her investigation. Oh, your abilities are sometimes handy. 35, even Luo Xingchen couldn't help but praise it. Jubby, the heart beats again. Juvia immediately turned her head to look at Lucy, her tone low but proud. Praised. But not you. It's me, Juvia. 35. Well. Lucy had black lines all over his head. Perfunctory attachment. However, today's situation is not necessary. 35. Luo Xingchen spoke again. Wah! Juvia was stunned for a moment. Looking at the tower ahead, Luo Xingchen spoke slowly. It has been detected from the moment we entered the area around the Tower of Heaven. What is hidden or not hidden has lost its meaning. Saying that, Luo Xingchen took the lead and walked towards the front. Hey, if that's the case, let's do it. Mira Jane's smile grew even more excited. Turning to look at Urza, can you? If you are afraid, then Xingchen and I will kill that guy like Jia. Listening to the mocking words as usual, Urza shook his head helplessly, clenched his fists, and said in a deep voice, Don't worry. I made up my mind. How can I be afraid? It couldn't be better. Mira Jane turned to follow Luo Xingchen's pace. Let's go too, Urza said. Understood. Gray Lucy and others responded. Everyone just set foot on the island of Tower of Heaven. Several people were instantly exposed to the eyes of the patrolling soldiers. It's an intruder, the patrol captain shouted, immediately attracted soldiers from other directions. Immediately afterwards, the sound of rapid footsteps resounded continuously around. In just a moment, Luo Xingchen and the others were already crowded with soldiers who had rushed to hear the wind. Who are you? The soldiers shouted. Fairy tale. Gray shouted behind Luo Xingchen. Gray, who was about to charge, was directly stopped. It's too slow, I'm coming. Luo Xingchen took 2 steps forward, then stopped. At the same time, the badge of the extreme ice dragon was directly integrated into the body. The mouth opened, and the terrifying Zhao Li's magic power continued to gather in the mouth. The very ice dragons roar. Boom! The unprecedentedly huge azure blue cold current is like the cold winter wind sweeping through the prairie fire. A group of soldiers rushed towards the front. In just an instant, everyone in front of Luo Xingchen was directly covered. Wow, the body can't move. It's cold, well. One after another, the screams gradually stopped as the ice spread. In the end, the scene returned to calm. Left alone with the exception of Urza and Mira Jane. The unbelievable exclamations of Gray and the others with their mouths wide open and their eyes widened. Good, so strong. Simon secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva. At this moment, he is very fortunate that Luo Xingchen had left before. No magic is used. Otherwise, I'm afraid I'll have to die on the spot. As expected of a star, a single blow clears the battlefield. After a long time, Gray wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and sighed. As expected of Lord Xingchen, water and ice are a natural match. Juvia, who had reacted, clapped her hands together. Seemingly thinking of something, he immediately turned his head to look at Lucy and said viciously, It's with Juvia, not you. Lucy was speechless, twitching the corners of his mouth. Chapter 191 Paradise Game. Go to war. Hey, we're the Sakura-colored spiky-headed guys caught today and a blue cat. Gray came to a soldier who narrowly escaped Luo Xingchen's attack. He grabbed his collar and asked in a low voice, Where have the soldiers seen this battle? In just an instant, almost all the soldiers present were frozen into ice sculptures. If I hadn't stood farther away, I am afraid that he is one of them. And at this moment, facing this ferocious figure in front of him, the soldier dared to hide it and hurriedly said that Mr. Zio locked him in the underground cell. Talking, the soldier stretched out his trembling fingers and pointed to the Tower of Heaven not far away. It's on the ground floor. You can see it if you go. Is that so? Gray smiled slightly. He raised his fist and slammed it down directly at the soldier's face. Boom! With the crisp sound, the soldier fell into a faint. You still lie here honestly, don't get in the way. After putting the sentence down, Gray got up. He looked at the people behind him. Then an okay gesture. Let's go. Jalal also greeted us. Luo Xingchen stared at the stone stairs slowly descending from the Tower of Heaven in front of him. Several people looked at each other and nodded. He moved his steps toward the stone ladder. At this moment, the top of the Tower of Heaven. Lord Jalal, since Urza has entered the tower, grab her quickly and perform the ritual. There's no time to play anymore. The elegant man with long hair and waist 750 looked at Jalal in front of him and exhorted. Facing the words of the figure, Jalal still raised his head unhurriedly. Looking at him, he opened his mouth and said, "If that's the case, are you going to go out, Vaterludis?" Squinting his eyes slightly, the elegant man known as Vita Ludas asked softly, "Is it okay?" "Of course." Jalal smiled softly. Immediately, the magic power of Vidal Ludas in front of him began to soar. His waist-length hair was blown up by the rising of magic power. Completely different from the previous image of Nasvin. Barbed shoulder pads appear on the shoulders. There was a strong and weird makeup on his face like a clown. In the arrogant smile, there is a wild taste all the time. At the same time, two other figures came slowly from a distance. Among them, a woman was wearing a kimono with two-tier moles under her eyes. On top of her pink hair, a small braid was tied. The rest are scattered on the back. A sword hangs from his waist. The other is even more bizarre, although with the body of a human male. But it has an owl-like head. On the back is a huge rocket booster. Assassination Guild skull and bones. He looked at the three in front of him. The corner of Jalal's mouth raised a slight smile. Vita Luda's eagle. "Hey, I'll show them the best and the deepest hell." 35 madness filled Vaterluda's face. "Ow!" Jalal's gaze turned to the owl man. Woohoo Owl's head turned 90 degrees to the side weirdly. An even more weird chuckle came out of his mouth. "And Captain Turtledove." Jalal looked at the woman in kimono standing in the middle again. "It's going to be a big celebration tonight." Turtledove slowly opened those amber eyes. With one hand lightly placed on the majestic figure in front of her chest, Wei Wei bowed. Assassination Guild skull and bones. Special guerrilla unit, 3 crows. Join. Next, it's your turn to play. Jalal raised his head slightly. A smile twitched at the corner of his mouth. On the other side, Luo Xingchen and others entered the Tower of Heaven and went directly to a hall. Looking around the layout, it seems to be a restaurant. The table in the middle is full of food and so on. Ignoring his surroundings, Luo Xingchen came to the exit of the restaurant. There are upward and downward passages. If what the guy just said was right, Natsu should be locked down below. Mira Jane said, wrapping her arms around her. Then Jalal should be on the top floor. Urza looked towards the upward passage. "What should I do?" Mira Jane looked at Luo Xingchen. Frowning slightly, Luo Xingchen was about to speak, but it was interrupted by a sudden, resounding voice. "Welcome to Tower of Heaven. I'm the ruler of this tower, Jalal." The pawns of both sides have been gathered. 35, the extremely familiar voice made Urza's eyes instantly widen. "Jalal." Immediately afterwards, several mouths appeared on the surrounding walls. "Make me feel a little sick." And Jalal's voice came from these mouths. "These mouths speak." Gray was clearly startled. It's about Jalal wanting the whole tower to hear his voice. Simon looked serious. "It's almost time to start. Paradise game." "Huh? What game? We don't have the heart to play any game with you." Mira Jane said disdainfully. "The rules of the game are simple." Jalal ignored the rest of the voices. Self-talk. "I will use Urza as a living sacrifice and perform a ritual to bring Zerif back to life. In other words, if the door to paradise is opened, I will win. If you have a way to prevent this from happening, you will win. However, in order to ensure the excitement of the game, I also have 3 new fighters on my side. 5, with Hugh and Wally and Miliana, that's 6. And because of Simon's mutiny, the situation is 7-6. Hold them off." Simon clenched his fists. Even Urza frowned. A direct conflict with Hugh and the others was something Urza didn't want to see. As if thinking of something, Jalal's words sounded again. "Finally, I would like to remind you that the council has decided to use the magic spirit power on this place. If it falls, everything here will cease to exist by then, and it will be the end of the game. Then, Please enjoy this game to the fullest. 35 with the fall of the voice. A mouth on the wall gradually disappeared into the wall. However, Jalal's last words made everyone feel a layer of pressure out of thin air. Although Luo Xingchen knew that the magic spirit power would be absorbed by this tower. But it's not 100% sure. Again, this is not an anime from a previous life, but the real world. Therefore, anything is possible. Luo Xingchen didn't intend to gamble everyone's life on the memory of his past life. Gotta get up to speed. It's not just Luo Xingchen who thinks so. Simon, who grew up with Hugh and others, naturally couldn't see his companion's conflict with Luo Xingchen and others. Therefore, he planned to go to dissuade Xiao and others. And due to time constraints, after Simon said a word, he hurriedly ran into the distance. In this regard, everyone was speechless for a while. However, out of concern, Luo Xingchen still asked Gray to follow Simon to avoid any accident. As for the mission to rescue Natsu, Luo Xingchen turned to look at Juvia and Lucy. Said, Natsu, I'll leave it to you. There shouldn't be too strong defense below. Also, after rescuing Natsu, get out of Tower of Heaven immediately. We'll find you soon and we'll be reconciled. Luo Xingchen also said this to Gray just now. Just leave the tower as soon as you finish your mission. Yes, Lord Xingchen seems to be the first time Luo Xingchen has actively requested. Therefore, Juvia was very excited. As soon as Luo Xingchen's voice fell, she grabbed Lucy's hand, run towards the stairs below. Hey, slow down. Slow down. Lucy, who hasn't reacted yet, screamed in horror. That guy seems to be very excited. Looking at Juvia and Lucy, who disappeared in a flash. Mira Jane's long-lost rant. Then he turned to look at Luo Xingchen. So, shall we go straight to Jalal? Of course, it's better to speed up a bit. Luo Xingchen nodded, greeting Urza and Mira Jane to head up together. Chapter 192. The game is over. Jalal on the stairs on the outer wall of the Tower of Heaven. In order to tell Hugh and others the truth, Simon was rushing towards the top. As someone who has lived in Tower of Heaven for many years, except that the top floors of the Tower of Heaven cannot be climbed up because of Jalal's orders. Simon still knew the location of the room where Hugh and others were, but it's only limited to that. As for Jalal himself, which floors and rooms are at the top, even he doesn't know. Whoa, whoa. The sudden sound from the sky made Simon stop abruptly. He raised his head and looked straight up. Pupils shrink sharply. How could it be him? The next moment, a strong man with a bird's head suddenly appeared in his field of vision. Ow! It's actually this guy. Sweat poured down Simon's face. Owl came to Simon and was suspended in midair by relying on the rocket propeller behind him. Pointing at Simon with one finger, he said slowly, Simon, the one who betrayed Tower of Heaven. Then it should be executed by the righteous warrior Owl. Damn! Simon knew how powerful and difficult this guy was. So definitely don't fight him. Cursing in a low voice, without the slightest hesitation, Simon rammed towards the side window. Escaped into the Tower of Heaven. Justice Owl, you are absolutely not allowed to escape. Watching Simon flee, Owl shouted, and the rocket propeller behind him erupted into flames. Take him to chase where Simon fled. The other side, the lower ground floor of the Tower of Heaven. Lucy and Juvia stared blankly at the iron door that kept shaking in front of them, and the smoke and dust splashing up ahead. Natsu, the dragon, has always been this reckless. After a while, Juvia came back to her senses and looked at Lucy beside her. From a certain point of view, Lucy scratched his head in embarrassment and said helplessly, since Luo Xingchen asked the two to come to rescue Natsu, the two quickly came to the negative floor. Indeed, as Luo Xingchen said, there are not many guards here. Both of them were magicians, especially with Juvia's powerful combat power. They quickly killed a group of guards. Without too many twists and turns, the two found Natsu. After all, this guy keeps yelling. The entire negative layer can be heard. After that, things went smoothly. The iron gate was directly split open by Lucy using magic to summon Taurus of Taurus. The forbidden magic handcuffs that bound Natsu were also cut off by Juvia. Natsu, who had just broken free, roared in extreme anger. Immediately after that, he planned to seek revenge on Wally with the square face, and also shouting to save Happy. He ignored Juvia and Lucy and disappeared in a flash. What now? Lucy turned his head and asked Juvia. What else can I do? I can only chase. Juvia sighed. After all, Lord Xingchen's order is to leave with Mr. Natsu and the others after the rescue is successful, just in time to rescue Mr. Happy with Mr. Natsu. Speaking of which, Juvia paused. He turned his head away and said, However, why does Juvia have to act alone with Miss Lucy? Lucy was startled, then helplessly twitched the corners of his mouth. It's also impossible. Juvia sighed. Then he seemed to think of something, and his cheeks flushed. Although it is Lord Xingchen's explanation, there is nothing to do about it. Unconsciously cupping his cheeks with his hands, he squeezed and said, However, he actually let the two rivals get along alone. What kind of tragedy is he expecting to happen? Lucy felt like he was going crazy, covering his head in collapse. What the hell is going on with this guy? The sound of footsteps was so clear in the empty space. It also instantly made Juvia and Lucy vigilant. Immediately afterwards, there was a piercing metallic screeching sound. The loud noise made Lucy cover his ears involuntarily. But on the contrary, Juvia actually thought it sounded a bit nice. But before they could complain, the noise-making figure approached the two of them. Nearly 3 meters of long hair was dragged to the ground. Pale fingers fluctuated the guitar strings in his hands. The constantly shaking head seems to indicate that the person who came here has been immersed in his own music. From time to time, there was a cry of extreme excitement in his mouth. This guy has long hair. Lucy complained involuntarily. He should be one of the 3 warriors, Jalal said, feeling the unique magic. Juvia frowned slightly, looking up and down at the figure in front of her. How the Assassination Guild, the Skull and Bone Society, one of the legendary 3 crows, Vita Luda's eagle, is me. Vita Luda's raised his head. The 3-meter-long hair fluttered along with the trend. What a long introduction. Lucy shook his head silently, but Vader Ludas ignored Lucy's plan. The originally stagnant fingers waved the strings again, and the harsh noise appeared again. Start now. Concert from Hell. Rock you. 99 as he shouted. The long flowing hair stretched like a whip, headed towards Lucy and Juvia in front of him. The battle begins in an instant. Through the layers of channels, Luo Xingchen, Urza, and others stopped halfway through. He looked at the fork in front of him. Is this the passage to the outer wall of the Tower of Heaven? Urza said with a slight frown. It should be, but the point is, how do we go now? 35 Mira Jane stepped forward to observe and asked aloud. In this way, I will go outside and fly to the top to find Jalal. Luo Xingchen gave a suggestion. Then I'll follow you. I can fly too. Mira Jane speaks. But Mira Jane's words just fell. Luo Xingchen shook his head and refused. Our target is Jalal, and we're still not sure the guy is there. Looking at the 2 people in front of him, he said in a deep voice, So, if I act alone, I'm more suitable. Saying that, Luo Xingchen pointed to the direction the 3 of them were heading. As for this path, I'll leave it to you. Mira Jane and Urza looked at each other. I also know what Luo Xingchen means. Although there is some concern that Luo Xingchen will meet Jalal alone. However, in the end it was agreed. Okay, but you have to be careful. Nodding lightly, Luo Xingchen returned a confident smile. He turned and headed for a fork in the road. Came to the outer wall of the Tower of Heaven. Looking up, you can find that it is not far from the top floor. Squinting slightly, Luo Xingchen intends to climb to the top in one breath. As for what paradise game, can't see Jalal or anything without hitting 3 crows. Luo Xingchen did not intend to comply. Feet slightly bent, the power of the ice dragon, which has not been lifted, began to surge in his body. The wings of frost dragons, Frost, 35 hum, a blue magic circle spread out behind him. Immediately afterwards, the cold air surged out, and on his back, gorgeous wings that shone with brilliance in the sun condensed. Feet slightly bent, Luo Xingchen jumped up suddenly. The wings behind him swayed, and every time they waved, they would bring up a large swath of cold currents. covers the surface of the adjacent giant tower with cold ice crystals. The rapid speed took Luo Xingchen straight to the top of the tower. Into just a moment, he has come to the top floor. The nose moved slightly. Very dangerous breath. Is it here? The wings fluttered. Luo Xingchen went straight to the huge glass that was sealed in front of him. Boom! The sound of glass bursting echoed in my ears. The flying debris knocked down the chessboard in front of Jalal. A look of doubt appeared on his face under the hood. He turned his gaze to the figure not far away. I used to think that you would come here first, and I thought that Urza would come here first, but I never thought that you would be so fast. Luo Xingchen. There was a surprise in Jalal's words, but not much panic. The wings at the ice crystals turned into dissipated. Luo Xingchen walked toward Jalal. A low voice followed. Game over. Jalal. B. Chapter 193. The collision of heaven and earth across the empty hallway. Urza and Mirajane came to a hall, different from other halls. It looks like a specially built viewing hall. A wooden promenade extends from the exit of the passage and runs through the entire hall. On both sides of the promenade, there are cherry trees in full bloom. Falling pink petals dance in this space. I didn't expect that there is such a place in this ugly tower. Looking around, Mirajane spoke. Be careful. Someone seems to be coming. Urza's eyes narrowed. His eyes were fixed on the end of the corridor. The visitor was a woman, wearing a more revealing kimono. His feet were on wooden sandals, and his long pink hair, like cherry blossoms, fell behind him. Holding a sword, he stopped in front of Urza and Mirajane. The ethereal voice resounded slowly. Let me introduce myself first. The little girl's name is Turtle Dove. Please give me more advice. 5. You said your name was Turtle Dove?
No more novels? Take part in the voting. The most requested novels and those with the most likes will be chosen for publication on euroaudiobooks.com. There, I can upload as much as I want without the risk of receiving a strike. Our 18 novels and other content that exceed what is morally acceptable are only published on Patreon or the free novels page. Remember, the site is funded by donations on Ko-fi and Patreon memberships.